Ahoy!
That's good.
Arr, me mateys.
Welcome to the back corner. You did the whole.
Arr, we're here in the back corner.
It does have pirate vibes.
I mean,
yeah.
you could
feel-
dance with a peg leg.
I feel like I'm swashbuckling, whatever
There
that
you
means.
go.
But that
Well,
would be
you
the
know, if you
music.
got buckles, you got to swash them.
You gotta swash those.
What they
bugs.
say about buckles.
You can't have any unswashed buckles.
Very good.
Welcome back to the back corner.
Yeah, welcome to the Dozens.
And the dozens.
So glad you guys are with us again.
And welcome back, Dr. Ben MacDonald.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Ben.
It's great to be back.
We're so glad you're back.
You are the first
I thought I might.
Outside return guest.
official returning guest.
Isn't that
Yeah.
awesome?
I think we're gonna have to call you a regular.
Was I also episode 1?
You're episode
Am I the?
2.
I was
episode
episode 2,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
you really
First,
put
I
us
was
on the
episode
map.
1 external again, though.
Yeah.
You
All
really,
right.
really put us on the map.
Okay,
So,
I'll get the plaque
we
framed
owe you
later.
a great debt of
That's
gratitude.
good. Okay, perfect.
You were the first guy we thought we should go out of our way to get this guy to come back. Dan and Anthony, we can just tell, or Mike and Anthony, we can just tell them to show up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yep.
can't do that with me. That's
But,
good.
Yeah, take
Exactly.
some planning, some logistical execution to get you back here from Halifax. So.
Well, I'm back, and the coffee is once again tremendous. I was offered coffee by Ron here, so
I'm drinking King's Church Standard Issue. It is not tremendous. So
No.
enjoy your Ron bougie coffee that
It
you
is
did not
bougie
make for
coffee.
me.
and I once again am enjoying some of the finest sugar-free grape Kool-Aid that the Superstore has.
is that
to
really?
offer. Oh,
That's
yeah.
like your Bert Kreischer moment
this
right
is
there.
my
You're
whole
drinking
thing.
Kool-Aid.
First thing in the morning.
That's
all day.
awesome.
Nothing like a Kool-Aid in the
All
morning to
day.
get you started.
When else would you drink it?
Are there electrolytes
know.
in that at least? or is that
No,
just-
although I do mix it with creatine once a day.
Hey,
so, you
okay,
know,
there you
5
go.
milligrams is all you need.
yeah.
5 milligrams of creatine?
Absolutely,
Three
yeah.
to
I'm
three-
Is that what they say?
three
Are
to
you
five.
not on a 5 milligram of creatine
I
once a day?
just do a scoop or two. I
Yeah.
don't really,
Well,
I don't
that's
really,
what it-
I
that's
kinda
what it is.
eyeball
Typical
scoop.
scoop is 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm probably more like 7.
Do you dry
Yeah.
scoop it like a man? No.
Just
That's what
powder
I
in my
do.
mouth?
I take
It
a
is-
scoop of creatine and pop it back
Really?
in water.
If you didn't know,
Well, it's
you would
tasteless,
you
but
would
it's-
think it was powdered sugar.
You would, yeah.
Like I was shocked by how fine powdered creatine
Yeah.
is when I first.
It's true.
Yeah.
It helps. I like it.
Do you just has anybody ever just put a dab on their tongue and just try to swallow it dry?
I don't think
We
I could
should do that.
We should.
That sounds like a challenge.
creatine
There we go. When we
I think
start
you
doing
could.
stunts in
Yeah.
season 2, that'll be one of the.
Exactly. Well, Ben, it is good to have you back, man.
Thanks very much.
You were on episode 2, and here we are on episode 2.
Ooh,
Oh man, little.
A hush comes over the crowd.
this means something.
This must mean
Yeah.
something. You want to hear
exciting.
You want to hear something cool though on weird number signs. We did like revival nights services at
yes.
King's, and so we had like a New Brunswick version. They did it in Halifax, and we did 4 nights in a row here at the Valley. And night 1, the ushers counted the people. They're standing room only. 777 people in the room. Really cool, like
Yeah.
Bible number.
Yeah.
Night 2, different group of people. Some people came that didn't come before. Night
way.
2, 777 people.
Oh, that's wild.
Night 3,
No way.
777.
No way.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is,
It's
I do love
eerie.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Which of course, those counts are never accurate.
No.
But the fact that that was the official count.
And different counters.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they weren't in there
That's-
trying to be like,
yeah.
I got to find one more person. Like
Yeah.
they didn't know that was a
I-
thing. That was-
or ask someone to leave.
I love things like that where you're like, I don't have to hang my hat on anything. You know what I
It's
mean?
just
Like
cool.
it's just
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
They,
it's-
have you ever heard Tim Tebow's story? Like the John 3:16?
316. I just heard
it's
it
one
for
of the coolest things ever.
for the first time.
and you go like, had it not happened, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the fact that it did is cool, and it's just one of those cool stories.
Yeah, if you haven't heard that, in fact,
Yeah,
we
go
should-
take a look at that if you
we'll
haven't
have to.
seen it.
Yeah, maybe.
Basically, Tim. Yeah, I won't go into that.
see if I
Go
can
look up
find
Tim
that, actually.
Tebow,
Maybe
John
we can-
3:16. He had it written under his eyes during like a major game. He ran for 316 yards, or passed for 316 yards.
Let's put that
The
in our
score
keeper
was
sleep.
like 31-6. Like it was, or I can't remember, but all the things showed up. And John 3:16 became the most Googled term. Or Googled Bible verse, but Googled anything.
AJ's going to talk to Ben about today's official sponsors. I'm going to
Oh,
send
yes.
Ron that video of Tim Tebow, and maybe we'll tackle that.
Absolutely. Okay.
So we got a couple, as always. We've got an official sponsor and an unofficial sponsor.
Of course.
And both of them are Dr. MacDonald related.
I throw the A up.
There.
This is not the Illuminati or
that's the Diamond Cutter.
Yeah,
from
the Diamond
Dallas Page.
I was going to say
our official sponsor is DDP Yoga. If you're
that's right. He's doing yoga now.
Seems like a legit, well-adjusted ex-pro wrestler.
Doing yoga,
Diamond Dallas Page.
He's aligned his chakras, and he is on to.
There's a lot of people who give him guff because he helps all these people, but he's always talking about like his DDP yoga thing at the time. But it's one of those he's not in a position he'll have these old, washed up, broke down wrestlers come and live with him for 3 years.
That's right.
Have you never seen this stuff?
I know all about the fact that Diamond Dallas Page. I hope our audience is like, what are you talking about? But that he does yoga now. I didn't know how.
So he does this. He'll often have these. His most recent one, different people, but usually professional wrestlers. But he's just on the tail end of a whole thing with Butterbean. Do you remember Butterbean?
Of course.
Yeah.
I remember
Butterbean.
Yeah. He was in a wheelchair.
Wasn't he Alabama guy? Yeah.
And super heavyweight. And basically, he couldn't walk for several years. And DDP will have these guys come and live at his house, and he'll work with them every day and get them back on their feet and all this.
Because their bodies are just trash,
destroyed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so anyways, but he seems like a genuinely some people go he's just doing it as an advertisement for his thing. It's well, A, his thing is what helps them, and B, how's he supposed to pay for this otherwise?
Well, hey, we'll say unofficial sponsor, Diamond Dallas Page Yoga.
Official sponsor, Acadia University. Tell us about Acadia University.
Right. Well, Acadia Divinity College, to be specific. Acadia Divinity College, where dreams are made. That's not our tagline at all.
But it could be.
But it could be.
Some dreams are made,
it's equipping Christians to serve. Yes. No, Acadia Divinity College, where I work as a recruiter and adjunct faculty. We always just like to plug them. All of our courses always available in person and online, we like to say. So if you live in Canada, you can study from anywhere. It's just an important thing to be aware of. And we have just launched a new program as well. We have our new Master of Arts in Theology in Counseling and Spiritual Care. So you can actually become a certified counselor in whatever province you're in. That's headed up by one of our faculty members, Dr. Glenn Berry, who's a wonderful guy and trained psychologist. And so that's one of the new programs we've launched. And that was this shows one of the ways that Acadia just kind of keeps adapting to fit sort of ministry needs today, because mental health is a major thing that pastors need to address. And so that's why we developed that program. And so I just wanted to highlight that. And Acadia also another one of the great selling points. It's one of the schools that I have applied to a master's program at and been accepted and never gone. There's 5 of those schools. Yeah, there you
I got
go.
a few of those myself.
Yeah, but the tuition is highly competitive.
That actually really does need to be said. Sometimes I don't like to come right out with that because I know
every
it's too
school.
pluggy.
No, every school will say that, but legitimately, as a guy who has nothing to gain, it is very competitive.
We actually did have for a while our graduates graduate with the lowest amount of student debt than any other seminary in Canada. So at least that was back in 2020. We could say that stat. I'm not sure I could confidently say now, but I'm pretty sure we can. If you and I won't compare to other schools by name, but the truth is, but we do offer incredibly competitive tuition rates. So definitely check it out, and you can contact me directly.
I'm going for the like my forefathers. I'm going for the honorary doctorate.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna demand that you call me Dr. Ingersoll.
Hey, you're on your way. You're doing well.
This is my dad's 80th birthday this weekend, and we were all hanging out, and we got talking about the John Wesley on a horse. So in the Wesleyan Church, if you've been ordained, I think it's for 60 years, you get this bronze statue of John Wesley riding a horse. It's actually legitimately pretty cool. And I was telling,
that's awesome.
It's 60 years.
Yeah, it takes a while.
Give the guy a car too.
Well, so it occurred to me a couple of years ago, though, I don't have to do this for 60 years. I just have to keep my dad alive for about another 4, and
you'll inherit it.
And I'll get his.
Yeah, you got it.
And so that I was stoked about that, and then I realized my uncle Reg got his wife's father's John Wesley on a horse.
All right.
Because he was, he's the pastor in that family or whatever. But he doesn't have any kids. So if I play my cards right, I can have 2 horses.
I bet you I can order 4 off Team with this afternoon.
And they're making John Wesley horses.
No doubt. So that's our official sponsor, Acadia Divinity College. Yeah. Check them out. And available wherever you can Google Acadia Divinity College. And then our unofficial sponsor, also an organization you're connected with, Ben, Apologetics Canada.
That's right. Yeah, I've been doing some work with Apologetics Canada lately, which is really, I think, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but it's kind of funny to say because I remember the last time I was on this podcast, Wes Huff had just gone on to Rogan, and we were talking about it, and I was going, yeah, it's crazy. I knew him back at Wycliffe College, and now he's doing this thing. And then fast forward to now, we've traveled the world together and been filming podcasts and documentaries, and it's just been a wild ride.
It must be. We'll chat about it, but it must be like the amount of attention that Apologetics Canada is getting through that. Must
For
be
sure.
Wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean, Apologetics Canada was sort of growing on its own to begin with. I mean, they're fantastic.
They do awesome stuff.
Yeah, they do. They do some great stuff, and that's Andy Steger, who's the president there, and who obviously I met to make all that happen. But they were already sort of on the way, kind of growing and things, and then that happened with Wes, and it sort of just blew into the stratosphere. Yeah. And then I happened to run into him at exactly that moment, and I'd never met him before. But
I think there's somebody moving the pieces on the board.
I think God was at work. Absolutely,
I would say
it was incredible.
Well, we're excited because we actually want to have like a full on apologetics conversation. We've had some of the dozens. Have asked over the last handful of weeks. This is episode. This is 22 BC.
Yeah, it is 22
BC. Man, this is wow. We're stacking them up. We're almost done season 1. So
we're moving backwards in time.
We are.
Oh, that occurs to me.
22 BC. This
proleptic. Did we mention that last time? Okay.
This episode is also brought to you by the scent of Canadian Tire. I felt like it was time to bring that back.
There we go.
So I love Canadian Tire. Brought this out on
that was here when I came.
It hasn't been since. So
and
Canadian Tire is gonna.
Believe it or not, I didn't race out after that podcast and buy one, but
you didn't.
I didn't. No, which is strange.
Also, brought some back corner swag.
Oh, that's so cool.
The doctor. We got a hoodie.
Oh, I don't even have a hoodie.
That's awesome, man. Thank
you. I'm giving you the full.
The full apparel?
The full, what's the word?
Wardrobe?
The full season 1.
Dude, I love it.
Because when you're that handsome, we want you wearing our stuff.
Yeah, exactly. We want you. We post a couple.
Dr. Ben MacDonald, full-time apologist, part-time male model.
Don't let the jean jacket fool you. I am a doctor. Don't let the Canadian tuxedo fool you.
There we go.
And I grabbed a bunch of stuff from my office on the way down. It's like this. Someone gave me this recently. I thought it was really cool.
No way.
This is a real mite. From
that's super cool.
Like first century Judea.
No way.
Yeah, it's a mite.
That is awesome.
It's in your Bible.
So the widow's mite, like she gives her.
You do have to claim that on your taxes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Additional income. Mite. You're just like those Pharisees.
The guy who gave it to me just wanted that tax write-off. That's
why. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man.
Wow, you're really spoiling me here.
It's a real mite.
Great.
We want you to come back for season 2, so we're buttering you up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's
really
Did you
get
cool.
a load of the mite?
I brought that to show you. That was given to me.
Okay.
Jordan, one of the dozens, gave that to me.
I thought he was keeping that. I thought he was handing me a mite.
I will get you a mite though.
Oh, okay, all right.
I more brought it to show you.
No, get your buddy Wes to give you a mite.
I bet Wes has probably a collection of mites.
He could give us what's the word?
He has the actual mites that the widow gave.
Do you guys know about how he collects swords?
I did not know.
So Wes collects swords.
Very on.
So if you go on YouTube, Wes will like this. I mean, if you go on YouTube or on his website, you can find him wielding swords. Like he's a bit of a swordsman.
It's kind of nerdy.
It is. Oh, it's
sort of the intersection of manliness and nerdiness.
It's true. It is sort of like but now people are sending him swords.
That's fantastic.
So it's just very funny. I know.
If you'd like to send a sword to the back corner,
we do need a sword.
Probably be someone who knows us and can deliver it personally because we don't want weapons from random strangers. But
I'll take weapons from random strangers. Absolutely.
I can just imagine though, like his wife just being like, "Wes, there's another sword here."
The highest level of nerd to kind of cool, but mostly nerdy with weapons would be nunchucks.
Yes.
Especially if
that's
you
what
know
I'll
how
do.
to-
I'll start collecting nunchucks.
Nunchucks are like owning a sword and not being able to use it is okay. Owning nunchucks and not being able to use them seems kind of lame.
If you got
if someone gave you an old like broadsword and you just had it on the wall, that's cool. You don't have to know how to swing it around. But if you just have nunchucks,
totally,
and can't do anything with them,
this is a complete aside.
We should get some nunchucks.
But have you ever heard the thing about how the Ninja Turtles and their weapons are all specific to them?
No.
It made me appreciate the Ninja Turtles so much more.
What do you mean?
Like how they're
they each have but it's like Raphael is really hot-headed, and so he gets the size because they're a defensive weapon only.
Really?
Michelangelo is like the partier, so he gets the nunchucks because they're bombastic and you have to be controlled.
This is fantastic.
Isn't it?
Keep going.
Isn't it so cool?
Why does Donatello have the staff?
Because he's the most advanced technologically, so he has to use the most primitive.
And then Leonardo has the most self-control.
No, as the leader, it cuts both sides, right? Like it's like a two-edged sword. Wow. Isn't that super cool?
The depth of the TMNT going on.
I love it when there's like an embedded mythology.
But it's a katana, and katanas only have a blade on one
okay,
side.
well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But it's something about the sword being, there's something about a sword leadership. Whatever.
Who's your favorite Ninja Turtle?
I think for me, it'd probably be Donatello.
Dude,
I've always,
bros.
I know it.
I've always just liked Donatello.
I've always been a Raphael guy.
Really?
Yeah,
I think size are super cool.
He's pretty up there.
Size are a gardening
He
tool.
would be my number 2.
But actually,
that's what they started as.
That's right, and I think that has something to do with
you stick them in the ground and twist them, and it creates a hole to put the seed in, and then a little trough for the water.
I am sure they thought of that as
well.
So
the question is, what gardener was attacked?
Well, that's just no. But I genuinely think it was one of those like
realized.
I think it was one of those like feudal Japan things, and like they weren't allowed to have any real weapons, but they were allowed to have gardening implements, and so they figured out. Yeah,
good. I'm glad I brought that up because again, that's new knowledge. There you go.
And Donatello is the best.
Yeah. I would say he's usually my second favorite. Leonardo was actually my least favorite, generally.
Over the year, he was originally. Now that I can identify with the plight of the leader, I respect him a little more.
Yeah.
That's true.
So Michelangelo would be my least favorite. That guy's just a freeloading,
I think
you're just eating pizza.
Michelangelo is a good guy
jokes.
to have in the mix, but not as your like.
Well,
that's right.
He's a good side character.
You need the levity.
If we haven't lost everybody yet, Ron, what did you have for breakfast?
That'll bring him back.
Turtle soup.
Dream Theater?
Is that what you're like, the ratings are down. Ron, what'd you have for breakfast?
No, this gets rid of them, the rest of them.
This is some sort of Hero's Quest music.
It is.
Oh my.
Is this like AI generated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. This worries me.
Wow. Seems like a sequence in like Monty Python.
Yeah, just coconuts.
It felt like Lord of the Rings or Braveheart until the lyrics came in.
Oh wow.
Wow.
I don't mind this.
This is great. I might listen to it on the way home.
A hearty stew.
The Well of the Wandering Minstrel.
Wow.
That sounds like
there
a
you go.
legit thing.
That wasn't bad.
From like Zelda or Dungeons and Dragons.
It really does.
The Well of the Wandering
I
Minstrel.
feel like we should have mead.
AI is replacing the wrong thing.
Only I had a flagon.
It's really good.
You could fill it with mead.
What was that genre?
It's supposed to be Celtic.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that was in that
Yeah, no, it
zone.
was, sure.
Ish.
It was like cosplay Celtic.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Yeah,
We're getting
it was.
there.
What did you have for breakfast, Ron?
I was in rush today, so I had a good old Tim Hortons bacon biscuit sandwich.
Oh,
hash brown
the
too.
bacon biscuits.
there we go.
Very good. I'm a sausage guy.
You know, since I've kind of been doing the high protein thing, I eat the omelet bites pretty much as a meal on the regular.
Are you still on that? Are you still basically
For the most part.
like
I mean,
almost carnivore?
yeah, I'm like 85%,
Wow. Okay.
and then just a few.
Good for you.
He's like a carnivore, but there's not as much food available as he'd like, so he's had to try a few other things.
Yeah,
I was really on that kick for a while. I was
Yeah.
doing the same thing. I was
Yeah.
following it like kind of after the podcast.
Yeah.
And then I went to Italy, and it's all over.
Yeah, that's gonna be
And
hard.
I ate full pizzas to myself.
You went pastivore.
I went pastivore so fast.
I'm a carbivore.
Exactly.
I just don't
do
eat
it there.
bread or any bread products really at all.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's-
But once you're on that wagon, it's
my
really
wife
hard
makes
to
this
jump
incredible sourdough bread.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's my pre-workout.
Yeah,
really?
Yep, with some peanut butter on it, some carbs, a little bit of sugar.
I do.
That's
eat
why
peanut
we're
butter.
bros.
Fuels the muscles.
I've reintroduced peanut butter, which that's just peanut butter's the best.
It's good.
basically a nut-based frosting, but it is so good.
That's so true.
Were you on the one that we argued about that being a spread and not a condiment?
Were we talking about that?
We did.
No,
I don't know who was with, but I remember the argument.
We did top four things in your lunch, and you talked about
That's right, Gushers. And,
what was the one that you?
So Delicious.
That was a deep. That
was a deep cut. Deep cut to So Delicious. Yeah,
So Delicious.
That's right. Yeah.
We should do tinfoil hat time.
Yeah.
I feel like you can go down the vortex.
Let's go. Let's go.
Where's the sound
got a
effect?
ball
I got
of
too many
tinfoil
sound
behind
effects,
you.
and now I got to find them.
If we're going to be able to actually properly make hats, but do we? All right.
It's all right. People understand.
We might as well.
All right.
I've made a crucifix. We're talking
technically just a cross.
We're talking curses. Curses today.
Just to be clear.
Why? Does it have to be blessed to be a crucifix?
No,
It has to have Jesus on it to be a crucifix.
See,
I did not know that.
You didn't know? Yeah.
A cross is like just the empty.
It's a deep theological
thing.
point of Protestants. They're like, look, he's not on
I
it
guess I did
anymore.
not.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to say.
Whereas Catholics are like, you have to be sad about this still.
Okay, this is.
No, I'm just kidding. That's not how it works.
I will try to fashion a
talk about
tinfoil
that.
Jesus and put him on the cross. and turn
Tinfoil
him into-
Jesus sounds like the name of a really bad
Christian band?
or an
Totally.
album of a
Yeah.
Christian band from like '94.
It's a crucifix or a broadsword.
Or a
It's a sword.
broadsword.
There
Yeah,
we go.
nice.
So
Yeah,
I'm going.
cool.
I'm going. Sorry, cross.
There we go.
All right, we're talking curses today.
Oh, okay.
We have a video.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
think
let's
so.
get it.
Oh no.
And they're never going to win a Super Bowl. The Bills choking isn't new either. This started in the 90s when they lost 4 Super Bowls in a row. And 30 years later, it's still happening. The Bills choking every year, coming so close, but can't finish. I also have no idea why Diggs was yelling at Josh Allen. He got targeted 10 times. No excuses, catch the ball. But I will say on top of that, Josh Allen is the most overrated
wow.
quarterback in the league.
That's a hot
And
take.
once
Yeah, I'm going to
again, are
find
never
where you
gonna
live. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I have so much to say.
So
My
this
blood
is
is
the question.
boiling.
Are the Buffalo Bills cursed?
No, look. Okay. Look. We're okay. So now I am a big Buffalo Bills fan, but I have not earned the right to kind of be a part of that legacy for that.
Because you haven't been a fan
Yeah,
for
it's
the
like-
full 40 years of choking.
Exactly. Yeah, like I have not. I was not around really for the Jim Kelly days when there was the 4 falls of Buffalo and they kept losing and whatnot. So I haven't. That was the name of the 30 for 30. It was like the 4 falls of Buffalo.
Sounds like something from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Where were you when the Buffalo when the
Well,
Bills fell?
It was devastating. They kept losing.
Buffalo will answer.
And there is also a bit of truth to the fact that, like, you know, I'll say of this upcoming season, I'm a realist. I'm a little worried that we might just be in the same kind of position, like really good, but not able to quite get over the hump. So, but I live in hope. And I'll tell you this, I don't believe in the curses at all. That guy saying Josh Allen is the most overrated quarterback is insane to me.
That is.
And I just fully disagree. And we could talk about like the MVP race this year between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. I felt like there was a biblical analogy in that because people were really, you know, they were looking at the numbers and they were like, Lamar should really have MVP. And it's like, you can look at stats, but then there's what's the narrative? What's the overarching story? When you put it all together, were you watching the games? Because Josh Allen is the story. And let me tell you, I'm going to have a sports podcast by the end of this.
There we go.
I have, the world is, sorry, young earth creationists, the world is billions of years old or however old it is. And I am so thankful that I am alive at the same time as Josh Allen. Let me just tell you. I feel it is a privilege and an honor.
honor and
It is a
privilege.
privilege and an honor. And I cannot wait for him to start throwing the football again this September. And I will be there to support those Bills. Here's what I'm going to say.
Right up until they choke.
Here's what I'm going to say. Yeah, right up until, no, I will be with them then. The reason I don't believe in curses of sports lore is because in 2004, I watched the Boston Red Sox beat the New York Yankees. And they broke the curse of the Bambino.
Yes.
And it is the most remarkable thing that's ever happened in sports. And I watched it. My father and I watched that intently in Windsor, Ontario when it happened. And so because of that, I go, no, there's always hope. There's always hope. They will not always choke.
Although the fact that
the Leafs are cursed.
The fact that we refer to it as having broken the curse of the Bambino.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, that to me is more of an argument that curses are breakable.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But
I hung over them for quite some time.
That was a long one.
I'll also say this, in all those sports, like in baseball and like what we just watched with the collapse of the Leafs, so hard to watch that. And I'm not a huge Leafs guy, but I mean, like, just hard to watch that. Those are game 7 losses, right? Those are tournaments. In football, it's one and done. Okay, you're in the playoffs, you're out, and because of that, I don't think people realize like how hard it is to win a Super Bowl. If you want to talk about the Bills being cursed, you have to talk about 5-8 other teams in the league, right? Like,
are there that many teams that have gone that close? And to me, like, if a team never makes it to that far, they're just a bad
team. For sure are.
But the Bills do seem like they have had teams that should have won.
Yes,
had what it takes to win.
Well, no, but actually, so that's what's funny.
times.
Like, to be saying that after this season, the Bills shouldn't have nearly got to where they got to.
Yeah.
So it's actually the opposite. It's like the Bills didn't like, oh, you're cursed because you lost. It's like the Bills, that's why Josh Allen's the MVP. He had no Pro Bowlers on his team, basically, and did that with his team. Like, that's how good he is. That was the argument. Lamar Jackson had 9 Pro Bowlers on the Ravens. He was supposed to win. And Josh Allen beat him with what, 2?
I have some Baltimore fans in my life that
I love Baltimore. I love Lamar Jackson. Don't get me wrong. Lamar Jackson's amazing, but Josh Allen was the MVP this year. And if you don't believe that, you didn't watch football.
I think Josh Allen's a phenomenal quarterback.
I
definitely think the Bills are cursed.
I probably just made more enemies, by the way.
Yeah, it is to me like they do seem to have an uncanny ability to get close and never get there.
Yeah,
I was a kid back in the early 90s when they had their like 4 chokes in a row, and I had a bunch of friends who were from upstate New York who were huge, and it was just one of those, it just seemed dumbfounding. Like, how just statistically you should accidentally win one of those 4.
It is true.
So I don't know, man. I don't know. They do seem to have an incredible knack for not making it.
They're an all-time tortured fan base.
Yeah,
for sure. They're in the Rushmore Mountainous top 4 of tortured fan bases.
And they seem to have, again, I'm not a huge sports guy, but their fans, the loyalty and emotional investment of their fans, seems higher than a lot of other fan bases. And the things that fan base has to be tortured by, like it's a weird combination. They're very enthusiastic fans whose team always chokes.
Just can't get it.
I would put the Maple Leafs in that cadre.
I feel like Leafs fans' spirits have been broken, and they're as faithful,
see that coming,
and they have as much to be disappointed by.
Yeah.
But they seem to expect it. Like, when I hear Leafs fans talking, they're like, I heard them this week because the Leafs got beat out, right? Going,
well, at the time of this recording.
Yeah. Going, well, I'm disappointed again. Time for next year when I'll be disappointed again. Whereas Bills fans are always like, nah, man, but next year. Like, we're legit. We're definitely doing it next year. Like,
Now, I did not just say that.
They have an unbreakable spirit that I respect.
He will.
Which I think might be more demographic than anything. Like, the Bills fans are certifiably crazy.
No, that's what I'm saying.
There's like, not all of them, but
no, I have made it a point. I think I mentioned this last time we were talking about the Bills. I have made fun of the Bills for years.
Yeah.
But legitimately, in the last probably year and a half or 2 years, I've become. Now, don't get me wrong. When I say I'm a Bills fan, it's not like I watched a game. I'm not that big of a. But like, I'm hoping for the Bills to win, sheerly because of the dedication of their fan base. These guys deserve a win.
I have a growing theory that there might be like some kind of principality over that region, because a lot of Bills fans are from Toronto.
Really?
It is. Absolutely. That's part of the reason why I'm a Bills fan.
And you can pull the Buffalo Sabres into this conundrum of being tortured, because they haven't, I think, been in the playoffs in 20 years even. Like, they're atrocious.
So really, Toronto is the problem.
I think it might
trying
be.
to say.
It might be. The Jays have won. The Raptors, my Raptors, have won.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think maybe you're going the wrong direction on this. feels like
Buffalo is spilling over into Toronto.
Yeah, it feels like the upstate New York is where the curse is.
We're getting Leaf fans,
and it's drifting over to Toronto.
It could be. It could
Maybe.
be.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Bills aren't cursed. They just have bad luck. Are curses real, just in general? Like, what do we think about curses?
Let's
go a little deeper on the tinfoil hat.
That's a great question.
Take it outside of sports lore.
Can you define? Can you use it in a sentence? No. Can you define curse for me though? Like in the way? What do you mean by curse?
Is there such thing as spiritual powers that can hang on a person or a place that have been put there that reap dysfunction and destruction?
So far above my pay grade.
You don't have an apologetics line about curses? Like,
I'm not there yet. No,
you didn't cover that. You didn't cover that in your PhD.
I mean, I'm inclined to say that obviously we believe in the spiritual realm, right? You believe in principalities and powers. So, like the idea of curse in the sense of actually lingering something hanging over. Hard to say with that, but I am inclined to say yes, because there is a sense in which, it's like when I was a kid, my dad would say, like, if you're ever at a party and there's a Ouija board, like, don't play with that. Yes. And it's like, why? And he's like, because it's real. Like, it's real in another way. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like you're messing around with stuff you shouldn't be messing around with, because that is a realm we believe in. Like, we believe in spiritual principles.
But there are, like, to me, there would be, like, take the Ouija board. You're bringing on destruction to yourself because you're opening a door that gives access to spiritual powers.
Yeah.
I think of curses more of that someone partnered with those forces and opened that door over you.
Right.
Like where are we on that? On witchcraft and like, can somebody come along your property and say, there's the pastor lives there. I'm gonna put a curse over this property.
Yeah, I lean to there's probably a reality to that. Yeah.
I think my sense is with curses is that people tend to either be to so downplay them that it's one of those, like, they, even if they allow for the theoretical possibility, like functionally they don't believe in them. Like, yeah, sure, maybe, I guess somewhere, like there's some place in Africa where that could happen or whatever, but it's not a thing that ever happens in our day-to-day life. Or they go the other way to where, like,
everything.
Well, like if you hear people, if you dropped your water bottle and went, "Oh, I'm such a klutz," people would say, like, "You've just spoken a curse over yourself." Of like, it's like, take a deep breath, man. Like, I don't think you accidentally curse yourself.
Yeah.
I think if there is such a thing as cursing yourself or cursing someone else, or to whatever extent that is a real thing, I think it's something that requires a certain amount of intention, as opposed to just like, I think there's a level of talking negatively about yourself, not on stupid things like I dropped something so I'm a klutz, that's not healthy for you psychologically. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like if you're constantly telling yourself you're an idiot, that's not good for you. But I don't know that that's opening some door to some principality or power. I know people who would say never say that you're cursed, because that is putting a curse on yourself. Well, I'm not arguing with their experience, but the logic of that doesn't hold up.
Let's at least tying that back into sports curses. Then, where were the witches hunted out?
Not far.
Not far from where all of those Boston teams went and had dynasties.
Salem.
So
did you know
they got rid of all the witches, and look at them.
Those
they broke the curse.
The Salem witch trials cracked off in my ancestor's tavern.
Did they really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, he was the tavern owner where they decided, let's find the witches.
Have you heard the whole idea that apparently, now this sounds so campfire, but what's the stadium?
We got the Canadian Tire candle.
What's the stadium that the Bills play at?
Foxborough.
Sorry, that's the Patriots.
Oh, sorry, the Bills play at? Sorry, is that what you're saying? They're building a new one right now. It's Highmark Stadium?
Yeah, that apparently there was a Native American burial ground. Like, again, it sounds...
Oh, really?
Oh, wow, yeah. Is this
like
where they're
on
going?
that land?
And that's why the Bills can't win? And they lose to the Chiefs?
When I was...
That's why? It's like, why they lose to the Chiefs?
We're on to something now.
No, but legit, when I was looking for videos for this, that was one of the one of the rabbit holes some of those go down.
New
you
stadium.
can find like this was hilarious to me because I knew you were coming on. I knew we wanted to talk about something tinfoil hat time. I knew the Bills are choke masters, so I said there's got to be a theory that there's a curse. I'd never heard it, but it's got to be. There's like hour-long documentaries on YouTube about how the Bills are cursed. Wow. And anyways, some of them I didn't watch any of the hour-long ones, but that's a thing that Highmark Stadium is being built on. Another one I saw was the curse of Patrick Mahomes because the Bills gave away a first-round draft pick or whatever to the Chiefs, and I was like, that's not a curse, that's just dumb.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What if we gave up our first-round draft pick?
The New York Giants are cursed because they gave away Saquon Barkley. Like, no, that was just a bad move. Yeah.
What's your take on curses, Brent?
So in the
sports or otherwise,
in the macro sense,
yeah,
I obviously believe in curses because of like Genesis 3.
Sure.
So there's
You're
that.
going there,
There's just like
the ground is cursed.
Curse of sin and death.
So and that's where I think in a different that I don't think is typically the colloquial way.
I also believe in
but
micro curses in that I do think that
micro curses.
You have a hangnail.
I'm feeling micro cursed right now.
You will stub your toe once a fortnight for the rest of your life. It's a micro.
Okay, so
paper cuts will abound.
I believe it in the macro sense.
Yeah.
Like just like the entropy.
Yeah.
And then I do believe it in the acute sense that I think we live in a world where there are evil agents. And human beings can even participate with them and like partner with them and try to place that on people. I think that's very real. I think it's more real even to the believer than we think. I've had many times in my life where I've had a sense from like what I would say is the Holy Spirit just tipping me off to like pray the blood of Christ or walk around my property. I've found dead animals on my property. I am pretty convinced.
And you like live in the burbs.
Yes.
Like it's not like
I
walked my 40 acres.
I'm pretty convinced that there would be members of the occult that know who I am. Yeah. And like that. So I do believe that's very real. And a person who doesn't know who they are or what they have like in Christ, I think these are the reasons that superstitions and like, okay, what can we do to try to negate some of these things from happening? I think that's why superstitions develop. I don't live that way. I very much feel like curses are real. They're more active, probably the more active you are in the kingdom. But that said, I'm not afraid of it. Like it's one of those things that's I think the important thing. The moment that I become aware, it's a quick moment of prayer. It's a quick moment of like I pray around my property periodically. I'll walk around it and just like I'll cover my kids. Like I have authority, so I'm not.
See, that is the most important thing. I think that's almost why initially where even a little hesitation to admit the reality of them. Because like you said, you go back to Genesis 3, stuff like that. If you want to talk about curse in the macro sense of death, of course, that's a real thing. And even to what you're saying, I do agree. It's that I think as I was raised in the faith, I had that same understanding was like, well, then is this something I need to fear and avoid? It's like, no, the name of Jesus is powerful enough to do away with all of this. And it's like, so living into that is a reality. So I think it's because I couple that so hard.
It's important though for believers to realize there is like the curse in the macro sense, and Jesus saves us from the curse in the macro sense, but there's also like you are in a war zone.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You're in a war zone.
I think there is it's important for a believer to learn that there's going to be times where you have to apply the blood of Christ to a situation. You need to take authority. Like Jesus did say, you will cast out demons. I think that's part of life. For sure. I just don't live like I don't go looking for it, but there are times where I'm like, just something in my spirit will be like, there's something extra there. Just cover yourself, take authority, pray that out, whatever. And so I try to live like that. So curses, yes. Authority of Jesus, even more.
Yeah.
I think that's it's a thing to be aware of not so you can be afraid of it, but just so you can deal with it, right? Like I almost think of it as like washing your hands. Like if your hands get dirty, it's not a major crisis, but you should wash them.
Yeah,
sure.
You know, and like if there is something like that, you know, active around you, whether you want to frame it as a curse or just a place that the enemy is trying to be at work, you know, whether that's on his own initiative or someone else has invited him or whatever else, like, there's not a competition. Like there's not a fight to be had.
Right.
Jesus is so much greater, but I do think we have to exercise that authority.
We probably live in a level of like sedation to it more than other Christians in other parts of the world, just because I think the enemy prefers to be covert.
So that's it. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point too, because that has been a thing in the West, is sort of ignoring that to a degree. And it goes to, if we end up talking about apologetics a little bit more, I mean, that's sort of part of it, is the idea that we've sort of rationalized everything a little bit too much sometimes. Not to say that you're not using logic and reason or anything, but the point is that like part of our belief system is the spiritual realities, and you should live into that.
Yeah.
I recently heard Tom Holland, again, not Spider-Man, but Tom Holland, the historian.
Big fan.
Yeah, right. And him talking about this very thing about churches should really be comfortable playing into that a little bit more. It doesn't mean necessarily like everyone becoming a Pentecostal or something, but it's just saying like own that part of your faith, like and speak it and talk about it, because the world is in a sense ready to hear it. They're a little more open to the idea.
A lot
that, like,
more, I would say.
Way more. I think we're noticing that.
One of the things we're noticing, like even here, is I would say even 10 years ago, from a preaching and ministry standpoint, you are leaning more on bringing Christian, messaging into a rationalist mentality.
Yeah.
Now it's people almost, are far more spiritually open, which in one sense is great, because you don't have to convince them.
Everything has its risks, right? Everything has a risk tied to it, but you're right.
We're seeing way more people that have dabbled in the occult, or like, hey, I went to my, I got my tarot readings, and like, so there are people coming in with spiritual baggage they didn't have.
100%, and that's the pendulum, right? I mean, like as society has moved away from God, you can talk about that in terms of secularization, or just in the sense of eradicating more traditional forms of Christian worship. Paganism is actually what comes back into right, and I think we've just experienced a little bit of that, and now it's kind of, people are realizing like, wow, I'm really in a dark place here. There are principalities and powers, and so you're seeing people come
like
back to
people may be waking up to the curse, and then trying to figure out solutions, and that's where I think witchcraft, superstition, all that, like people are just, you're gonna see more and more people going down those roads.
I would probably tend to talk about like this, the divide, less in terms of rationality versus spirituality, and more in terms of materialism.
That's about.
I don't mean materialism as in like I want to buy the new purse.
That's a better word.
Yeah, like, but the kind of all the only things there are is what I can physically take, like my five senses.
Yeah,
and I think people have figured out that if that's true, it is so unsatisfying that it's still worth trying to see if there's something else, which is where I think you get some of the, like some people who experiment with some of these occult practices, it might be with some sort of dark intent. I think others are just trying to do an experiment to see if there is something beyond the material. And so but I do think that those experiments are going to come with baggage.
Yeah, for sure.
But again, I think it's way easier to help someone who has gotten their head around the fact that there's more than what their five senses can experience to find Jesus than it is to convince someone that there's more than that. And so totally. I think that's one of those things that is not healthy that people are doing, that the Lord is going to redeem and use for sure to bring people to him.
I think it's one of the reasons why, and sorry if this is a little bit of a different topic, but it's related, I think, in many ways to apologetics. So much of apologetics, if you even want to call it that, has gone and centered itself around the idea of consciousness for this very reason, because the science around consciousness is pushing us back to like, you cannot reduce this to material substructure. This doesn't fit with pure naturalism, right? And just that very idea. So we're having more and more people writing about this and talking about the fact that like just what consciousness is, kind of leading all the way back to the idea that mind, is behind creation more than just material, is I think opening people more to this understanding. Which
why don't we start down that road? But
we're gonna keep her sweet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, keep her sweet.
We're sweeping the keep her sweet.
Well, let's get into apologetics, man.
Totally.
I think people are hungry for it anyway.
So
go for it. Yeah.
We alluded to at the beginning that you are now working with Apologetics Canada, an organization some people would be familiar with, more people would be familiar with their kind of front man, Wes Huff.
Yeah, that's right.
How did tell us a little bit more of that the story of how you wound up getting involved with them and what you do, and then we'll dive into some of the stuff you actually talk about with
like I said, it was in many ways it was not random. I believe
you doing that in the mic while we're talking is not helpful.
Ask me a question and then put tinfoil in.
He did it the whole time I was talking about curses.
I slid my mic away for that.
That's my buddy AJ.
All right.
Never change. Never change.
Take two.
Take two, yeah. Yeah, what happened basically, just like slapping your hand, basically was, we were on, like I said, we were on this podcast and we were talking about, because it was at that moment Wes had gone on to Rogan. And like I said, I knew him as a student at Wycliffe College. We weren't that close or anything, but we obviously had chatted and been in classes together and stuff like that. And so I had texted some of my friends when that happened, been like, wow, are you guys watching this? And they were like, this is crazy. Can't believe he's, having this moment. And then about a week after that, literally after us being here, I had a trip to Saskatoon, of all places. God hangs out there.
Can
sometimes.
anything good?
Huh. Yeah, can anything good come from it? No, not to trash Saskatoon. It was a fine place. But
you've got to be in Saskatchewan.
I was doing a recruitment
well
event. I was up doing a recruiting thing for with youth worker conference. Sid Coop and those guys, right? Yeah, for those you know. And was up there, and amazingly, this woman who works at Trinity Western, actually, who I just knew as one of the other recruiters, she came up to me and she had remembered me from another recruitment trip in Ottawa, and she said, like, aren't you also, like, do you have a PhD and you teach and stuff, isn't that? And I was like, yeah, I sometimes do that too, like I'm adjunct, and I'll teach a class here and there. And she was like, well, have you ever met Andy? And I was like, who's Andy? And she's like, Andy Steger. He's the president of Apologetics Canada. He's like one of the keynotes. And I was like, oh no, I've never met him. She's like, let me introduce you. And so she introduced me to Andy, and I just said like, hey man, how's it going? Like I know Wes, we went to school together. And he was like, oh, cool. And I told him a bit. I said, I'm at Acadia and I do some teaching there. And he was like, oh, so you have a doctorate? I was like, yeah. And then I told him a little bit more, and I said like, yeah. And I had a journalism thing in the past. He's like, so you did broadcast journalism and now you're a PhD? He's like, can we have lunch? And I was like, sure. And we had lunch. And then 20 minutes later, he was like, I think we need to hire you.
That's great, man.
And and I was like, wow, that's amazing.
It's called the back corner bump.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for it at all. It was something I just ran into him, and he kind of put it out there. And honestly, I also thought about it in terms of like, well, I recruit for Acadia, and this would give some good exposure to the school. Like, sure, what do you want to do? And he was like, well, why don't you just join us for a couple podcasts and stuff? Because so they've named me their Maritimes director, but that just means I kind of field inquiries from out here. And then literally, what was it? It was only a few weeks after chatting with him, they flew me to Washington, D.C. to film a documentary. They're filming the Can I Trust the Bible documentary series. This is sort of Wes's baby, but that's his project in the works. And they're just continuing to make episodes on this. So we went to Washington, D.C., went to the Museum of the Bible, did a podcast on the Megiddo Mosaic, which is one of this. Do you guys know about the Megiddo Mosaic? This incredible mosaic found outside of a prison in Israel.
Yeah, I've been to Megiddo.
Yeah, and it has an inscription on it that says Jesus is God. It was in a prayer. So this is like hundreds of years before Nicaea. Yeah. So you got to think this is showing that the earliest Christians really did worship Jesus as God. Yes. There was an equation of the two. And so that's a major Christological find. Mm-hmm. So we did a podcast on that. And I have to admit, like I went from going from like, I have no social media presence. I'm just like, I'm not into self-promotion. I just kind of do my own thing, right? And going from that to like, now you're on a podcast with Wes Huff, and it's like got over 100,000 views, and I'm just like,
wow,
crazy, you know. So it's just been a whirlwind. It's just
awesome,
been,
man.
and it's been really cool to see. I mean, I think they're doing some amazing stuff, and
for sure.
And I'm just kind of along for the ride right now.
Well, it seems like the Lord's really using like Wes and Apologetics Canada. Like I just saw him on Andrew Schultz. I was actually in Atlanta last week and listened to it while I was driving 2 hours to go 20 kilometers. I listened to the whole thing. Basically.
Atlanta, lots of time to listen to podcasts.
Yes.
and
that's the selling point.
You know, I was putting myself in his shoes. Like that is a tough one to go into. Like, I mean, that's a raunchy crew. Like that's
for sure. You know, I can say Wes has been very, very strategic in a way about like, well, who should I talk to? What should I do? Yeah. He's getting attention from everybody. And I just like, I'll just got to say like props to him in the way that he is being able to handle this.
He did it well.
He's not only is he doing it well, but like he's having fun with it too. I think that's been the thing, like hanging around with him this last little while. I was going like, you know, you're enjoying the process. Like he's having a good time with it. And he's representing us well because he really is. He got hit with every type of question.
Yeah.
And I mean, you saw that on Rogan as well, where it was like, Rogan was just interested in a conversation. He's going to go way outside of the field.
Yeah.
That, like, you know, Wes is an expert on certain things, not everything.
Yeah.
And so, like, there were things that he's going like, well, I don't really know. You know, what's the earliest calendar? He's like, I don't know. But like, I've never heard of that. But
how do they get to caramel? In that caramel?
But being able to speak sort of intelligibly to those things on the fly is not an easy thing to do, especially when you're surrounded by 4 comedians or 5 or how many there were, and they're giving you questions. And so, like, I think that it's impressive that this is sort of a thing with apologists I've noticed, though, is that they have, like, you got to have your set Rolodex of things that you know are going to come up, right? And you're ready for them. And so he's just like an incredibly well-prepared individual. Like
the thing
he's organized.
Have liked the most specifically with I watched his one on Rogan and then recently with Schultz, and he does obviously in his wheelhouse. He's great at, like, you know, building a case for biblical authority and like, hey, like our belief system is just way more grounded and just way more robust than all of these other ones. So he's awesome at that. The thing I've appreciated the most is he's bringing clarity to what the actual gospel is.
Yeah.
Like he did that with Schultz. He did that with Rogan, like in a way that, you know, some of these other characters that are, you know, out there in the zeitgeist, like Jordan Peterson and like
they're touching. They're around the fringes.
They're at the door, but they're not going through like this is what grace means. This is why Jesus had to die. This is why Christianity from a belief system is just different than all the other religions. Like Wes has done an awesome job. He did a great job with Andrew Schultz just on, again, like the what the cross means. And like I've just been it's been so cool to hear on the biggest platforms an actual accurate articulation of the gospel and not some, you know, slightly perverse
Jesus
works.
Is a great archetype of whatever
an archetype, or to go the other way where it's like, now go be good.
Well, and now and it's partly because he's the first actual confessing Christian to be asked onto these places.
Yes.
Right? You know, I mean, so Jordan Peterson has always been on the fringe. He's coming around, but he's not. And that's, I was reading some kind of statistic about like when he went on Rogan, it has like over, I don't know what it's at now, maybe in the 6 million something views or something like that. And they were comparing the numbers to sort of like the Billy Graham crusades and stuff. And if you think about it, it's like, this is the largest broadcast of the Christian message in church history.
Yes, it would be.
To kind of think about that and be like, this is sort of now in the books, you know, so to speak, as like, wow, this is really that kind of thing. And like you said, bringing clarity to it. Now, I mean, and Wes obviously too is his own thing too. Apologetics Canada is an organization that is, you know, has its own kind of statement, and there's a bit of diversity on that team, obviously, as well. But Wes is bringing attention to that, so he's kind of doing that of his own on his YouTube channel, so to speak, and whatnot, and hopefully it just brings exposure as well to the organization.
So let's dive into like, you know, these apologetics conversations. Like what, I guess, as we think about the kind of cultural zeitgeist from a strategic standpoint, what would be like maybe the number one, like if we could answer this question for the average person, what would the number one, like where's the starting point for?
Okay, well, the way you frame it, I'll say this. I think the problem of evil is typically always up front in terms of, but that is
articulate that question for the dozens.
Well, when you're talking about, I'll say at least there's two sides of this. It's like one is the more existential side where you say the problem of evil has always been one of the biggest conundrums for people to understand. So conceptually, how do we have an all-loving, good, all-powerful God?
Yes.
And yet there's still evil and sin in the world, and why the fall?
Reconciling
why is
those
this allowed?
Things.
People often go to the free will defense. We'll go to things like that. But it's a large question, and largely it's also one of those questions that continues, it's perennial. It continues to be asked, and it cannot be answered fully in a sense that just once and for all, there's a good logical answer and it's done.
Right.
That's one side. The people like Wes, I'm a theologian. I'd probably hang out more over here on that question. The other question people are really looking to, it seems right now, is simply this one about reliability of the facts, right? Can I trust that this is being told to me in the way that it's being reported, right? Was Jesus real? And if he was a real person, did he claim, did he actually do the things that he claimed? Did he actually rise from the dead? How can you make such a claim? Does that fit within our understanding of reality? So I believe one of the reasons why Wes is having the moment that he's having is because everything for a time and a place, right? Yep. He's well suited. He came at the right time, and he's done the work to answer the questions that so many skeptics have. Right. If you go ask somebody like Alex O'Connor, who's like the most famous atheist in the world right now.
Yeah, he asked Jordan Peterson if you put a video camera outside the tomb, and
exactly,
would you see a man?
And it shows you if he's the biggest atheist. Kermit the Frog answered back. Well, it's like,
it's not immediately evident to me.
We could go on that for a while.
It's not obvious. That's his line. It's not obvious to me.
Bucko.
But it shows you the question, like Alex O'Connor, if he represents that many people too, the questions he's most concerned with are those questions. He's concerned with, like, are these gospels reliable? Is this historically accurate? Can we actually? And so to have someone who is able to go, and here we can point to the manuscripts. I can show you textual variants. I can actually talk about the reception of the canon of Scripture or the Dead Sea Scrolls and how they're uncovered and what So I think there are two sides.
Yes.
And I think where the big questions lie. There's always going to be the sort of existential one.
Yep.
And then there's the kind of boots on the ground, facts of the matter.
It's interesting to me that neither of those come down to, is there a God?
Well, yeah,
I mean, it's connected.
Yeah, I hear you.
But historically, that was like the whole, if you want to do apologetics, you got to be able to talk about a clockmaker, and you got to like those kind of things. Whereas now it's more of like, is Jesus God?
Well, let me correct that a little bit too, because, or at least modify it to say, when you say historically, historically maybe last 20 years.
Yeah.
Historically, altogether, apologetics never had to talk about the existence of God. But I think that's the thing.
Just when you talk about he's sitting down with the leading atheist.
Yes, exactly.
And even the leading atheist isn't going, prove to me there's prove theism to me.
Yes. Well, and I think this is why, and I should be very clear about my words here. I mean, for the last 20 years, I have been very much skeptical of apologetics in general, because I've been going. There's a famous quote, I think it's Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who said, like, apologetics is where good theology goes to die. And I've agreed with him in many ways, because if what we're talking about is that type of discourse where it's like, let's prove God with a syllogism, all right, like by if X, then Y, and God is the end object of my rational discourse in that sense. There's almost a hubris to that in the way that, like, isn't God looking at us like, you prove me, I prove you, buddy? Like, what are you talking about? Like, God is. There's just a sort of common sense way in which the thing we're talking about can't be just put under a microscope and said, this is what. And so I think there's good reason why, like, Apologetics Canada's tagline isn't like reasons for your faith. It's love God, love people. And to me, that's the best apologetic, right? The best apologetic is, are you living a life within Christ? Are you living a life of holiness? Are you somebody that people turn aside to see what is going on over here. And if you don't have that, then I don't really care what your reasons are. And I think we're experiencing that more and more. And there's literature being written on this. People like Jonathan Haidt wrote The Righteous Mind, showing that, it's not Ben Shapiro, like facts don't care about your feelings. It's like, actually, it's the opposite. Feelings often don't care about your facts. Like you need to help people get over the threshold first. And so for me, the reason why I'm warm to apologetics is because it all depends on how you want to do it. There's a holistic way to do apologetics. And apologetics is also, we say giving reason for your faith. That comes from 1 Peter 3:15, right? Be prepared, sanctify the Lord in your heart, be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks, right? Why you have this hope. The context of that verse, importantly, comes in suffering for doing what is right. That is so important for it's not be prepared to give people a syllogism for the existence of God. Be prepared to give Aquinas' 5 points on why God is real. No, what it was is when you are being tortured and killed by your oppressors, and they go, why are you going through this? Yeah. Be prepared to give an answer for why you got hope in Jesus.
The assumption is you're going to be living a certain way it's going to cause questions.
Amen. Exactly. And I think that's the point. So there's this much more whole, and that's why I love our kind of like love God, love people is at the forefront.
Yeah.
And when you get people, what I believe is when you get people with a foot in the door and they go like, I'm open to this whole Christian thing. I used to not be, but I've seen some things happen in my life and I've developed this new appreciation for it. Then you can hit them with the facts and they go, oh, that's such a relief. Like I can hang my hat on that. I can really trust. Right. That's what happened to me. Like I had my foot in the door of faith and I was going, Jesus, I want to follow you, but I need to make sure I'm not being led astray here. I need to know that I'm being reasonable about and then that's when I ran into a Craig Evans in my life and went to Israel and saw the archaeological digs and did the manuscript stuff and went to Qumran and the caves. And you're like, this is unbelievably well supported. All of that provides a base, but it's not oftentimes, it's for some people, it might be enough to push them over, but that's not how everybody gets in.
This is maybe an oversimplification, but I've often, and we use this kind of rubric here, even when we think about like how we're discipling people, but, you have thinkers, you have doers, you have feelers.
Yeah.
People are led disproportionately by whether, some people are, I have to understand something in order to give myself to it, or I have to feel it, or I'm a disciplined person and I do things. And I think that you find that connected when Jesus said, the great commandment, like the whole thing's encapsulated in, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, like the totality of a person.
That's right.
I think there's a whole group of people, and this is why apologetics, I think, are so important, that just until they get a certain like level of answer. There's always going to be a leap of faith, but they have to build a ramp of reason that's maybe a little farther than some people. There are people that just they have a childlike faith that's just simple for them.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
me. I wasn't like that, right? It took me more, right?
And fair
again,
enough. You're wired in such a way that's I want to go get my doctorate. I want to spend time in books. That's how God.
Yeah, I always say not everyone needs to be a theologian. I did.
Right.
I did.
We had a few episodes back. We had David O'Leary on. He's like, what got me was standing at a Casting Crowns concert and just I felt something.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
Something in my spirit just came alive. I was like, this is real. I didn't need to read, any books on apologetics. I just knew.
I should, and that's what, I would clarify too. Don't get me wrong. I don't like turning God into under the microscope. We can prove God per se, but at the same time, I don't have any problem either with the ontological arguments for the existence of God. I actually think they're quite good. I think they're helpful. They can work, but my point is if it's reduced to that.
Yeah,
that's right. And then what I see, and it goes to this whole point is, then apologetics now gets into, well, what's the right form of faith? What's the and I have to admit, I'm experiencing this more and more, reading the YouTube comments, maybe something I shouldn't be doing.
Don't do it.
Never read the comments.
But there has been, we went to Italy to film stuff, and that was right when Pope Francis died. And we filmed a podcast.
Connection or?
Yeah, no, yeah. J.D. Vance was there.
A bunch of Protestants roll in.
The curse of J.D. Vance.
Exactly, yeah. We didn't go, he had died and then we got there. But it was all coincidence that we were there at the same time. So we said, we have to film a podcast outside of the Vatican. And we did. And I was encouraged. There was many people who enjoyed the podcast, whatever. But the antagonistic, like either Catholics on one side being like, you Protestant heretics don't know a word thing about what you're talking about or whatever. This is so wrong in so many ways. Or Protestants being like, why are you guys being so nice to Rome? And I've seen this more and more as like people commenting on it being like, shouldn't you be trying to convert Catholics instead of, and I'm like, it's not my approach, man. Like, and I'm not playing that game. And if you want to get into the apologetic world of like, we're going to argue to the ground as to why the Southern Baptists are the correct one and you're not, I'm just like, I'm not here for it. I'm not here for that discussion, and I can get into why. But
let's zoom in on some of the maybe arguments within apologetics that are emerging as like, you know, the stuff that is like Joe Rogan's asking these questions. Like let's build a case. Let's build a case for, okay, why is the Bible like reliable? Like I do think there's a lot of people, to your point.
Yeah, exactly.
That just there's the assumption that this is kind of hacked together and human beings made this.
For sure.
Hacked
together, the assumptions that people have, you're seeing it more and more, especially with just common confessions within the church, especially around Christ's deity. You're seeing that as well. Like, oh, do I even need to believe that Jesus was God? Like, no, he just wanted to be a good person. His disciples did that, right? It's that argument. It's like, well, after people did this. So, a lot of conversation around, for instance, Constantine and the Roman Empire, right? Didn't Constantine put together the Council of Nicaea?
Right.
So then, and the Trinity's not in the Bible? So, well, isn't that a problem? It's like, no, this is not a problem. Like, it does require just a little bit of layers being pulled back. But I think for the Rogan type audience, for those people, these are some of the questions that they're going after. They're like, aren't these copies of copies of copies, right? And it's like, no, they're not actually. Like everything we have is a copy at some point, but Christians have access to a embarrassment of riches when it comes to
so speak
early
to some
texts.
of those, because earlier on you were talking to like there's the the theological, and then there's the the historical case, and I think as you get building and you start to see the glut of riches, it starts to speak to the miraculous. Like when you start to look at just
how well preserved that stuff is versus any other ancient document.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think those worlds come together when you start exploring this. Right. And it may be one of the reasons why that's a hurdle for people to get over is because the Gospels, for instance, are both biography, but they're deeply theological works.
Yeah.
And they're meant to be. And that's the point of them. And so it's sort of obvious you're going to run into skepticism of every kind. This isn't a new thing. There's always been a skepticism. The disciples were skeptics that it happened, okay? So it's going to occur to people that this is making very grand claims. It requires a great deal of evidence.
I was just thinking when you saw how the disciples being skeptics, there's that in Matthew 28, Jesus appears and he ascends, and it goes, many believed and some doubted.
And some doubted.
You watched him ascend to heaven and you still doubted?
It is so true.
And some doubted. That always blows me away.
It does.
What
blows
more
me away
do you
too.
need?
I always used to say, you can put that at almost every level, and there's a constant refrain, it seems like, throughout the whole Bible of just, can't you just give them more evidence? Like, the rich man and Lazarus or something. It's like, totally. No, they had, there's plenty out there, actually.
That's where when you, that kind of historical, again, recent history, the previous phase of apologetics, I've always been like, I feel like people, far more than even the people who'd consider themselves like hyper-rationalists would admit, people kind of believe what they want to believe.
Yeah.
And the notion that if you just look at, just the facts or just the hard evidence or whatever,
and
then it's obvious. It's like, well, how many different people are looking at the exact same stuff and arriving at wildly different conclusions, right? Like, no, there's something more going on than just the math.
That's what I would say, as far as my work in academia has gone, my PhD, all that stuff, it centers around that very thing. It centers around the big word hermeneutics, right? This question of how do we interpret these texts? Everything is mediated to us. Everything is interpreted. And that's where people run into, issues in postmodernity, and they feel like that leads to relativism and all that. And it's like, not quite. It doesn't have to do that. The point is there's no escape from the act of interpretation, even in your science. That's scientism is one of the big issues we face in society, is people going like, well, if they just followed the science, and it's like, you have to interpret the science.
Yes.
There is no such thing, and I've quoted this many times before, I think it's an Alistair McIntyre quote. Facts are a 17th century invention, okay? The idea that there's just something cold, hard, and objective that doesn't include you, the subject, having to work through it doesn't exist. And I think the way the Gospels are written, I think they understand this very clearly. I think it's more maybe embedded into the cultural mind at the time. But this is why they're going, like, listen to the beginning of Luke, right? It's like, this is a history. Yeah. I'm telling you what's happening. I'm trying to make sure that you are aware this is accurate. At the same time, I'm also trying to tell you things about the identity of Jesus, right? I'm trying to say more. I think that sometimes the skeptics, the Alex O'Connors of the world, they think that is a point against the historical accuracy, because they go, well, look, it's a theology.
He's trying to do this.
Well, they wrote it this way because it's prophetic fulfillment. And I'm like, no, when it happened, people had to write it as it's prophetic fulfillment, right? Because they go, look at what just occurred. If you were to just witness it, you're just seeing a rabbi walking around doing miraculous things. But are you realizing the connection this is to Genesis, right? That's what's happening.
The way, when I teach the Gospels, Scripture in general, but including talking to the Gospels with some of my students, one of the things I'll always say is, like, if I ask you to tell me about someone, you'd have to pick what you were going to focus on.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so, like, this idea of, like, well, how come they don't all just say the exact same thing? It's like, well, because they're all so if I said one of you has to write a biography of A.J. Thomas, the church planter.
Yes.
One of you has to write a biography of A.J. Thomas, the husband. Yeah. One of you has to write a biography of A.J. Thomas, the woodworker. Like, there would be consistent stories that would happen in there, and they don't necessarily contradict, but you're going to focus on very different things, right? And you're going to emphasize different aspects even of the same story.
And that's also why, and this is, I think people sometimes are a little hesitant to talk about it this way, but that's also why you can even see what we would call a Christological development. And I don't mean that in the sense of, like, well, Jesus was really just a guy, and then we attach these mythologies to him so that he became God. No, I think he was understood as God from the beginning, but in what way and how still needed to be worked out. And that is okay. And there's a reason why the Gospels, therefore, you could say, we talk about the synoptic Gospels, meaning seen together, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They're in a sense part of a different tradition than the Johannine tradition, where John comes from. And so an apologetics point here is just something skeptics bring up as they'll say things like, well, John is this deeply theological gospel, probably the last written, important note, but it's this deeply like all the I am sayings, the ego eimi sayings, I am the way, the life, all of these things are only in John. Well, don't you think they would have mentioned it over here? And so this is just mythology. I mean, it's like, no, that's called Christological development. It's the very people who experienced and witnessed this traumatic act, right? This thing that we're in a sort of place of brain fog going like, what just occurred? What is this cataclysmic moment? And we're trying to interpret it. And that gets developed where eventually you get to a John who's going like, let me tell you what was really happening. And so all of a sudden he's emphasizing things that maybe, and that doesn't mean that the synoptics have a low Christology. They're far from it.
Yeah, it's not that they're articulating something new. It's they're getting better at articulating what they all experienced and saw in the
They're
first
starting
place.
to dial in and go like, look.
Here's how you can explain what we just witnessed.
And so people don't realize, I think sometimes, that like that's therefore what you're going to find in the early church is that they, as they're discussing doctrine, and here's really where I like to spend my focus and attention is on basically Christological matters, because we're still talking about that stuff, still trying to work it out. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because I see Christ as the center of everything, capital E everything, right? The Logos through whom all things are made is the center of theology. And so when you're working that out, people have to realize, like, yeah, there were moments where the church wasn't sure if God was equal with the Father, but they still said he was God. Like they just didn't know what that meant. And so, subordinationism, the idea, that's somewhat prevalent in the early, until somebody like Origen comes along and goes like, but logically, he has to be eternal, right? And so he has to be begotten, not made. And they go, oh, you're right. That does, it's like they're working out the math. They're going, that does have to fit. We have to make these pronouncements.
Of the things we know, what are the implications
exactly.
that flow out
and
of
so,
that?
And there's this backwards working that really helps. So when people get to the skepticism, when the Rogans kind of get to that place, and rightly, they want to know, they're like, well, didn't Constantine just get a bunch of bishops together and they formulated the Trinity? It's like, no, the Trinity is deeply embedded all through Scripture. It's all there. This is the language that's being used. But we needed to use our minds to logically follow. And that's why they say things like the Council of Chalcedon in 451 is where they make these dogmatic leaps forward, where they go, we have to say that they're co-equal in majesty, co-equal in being, like they are of one substance. That's Nicaea, but then later developed into saying like two natures together in one hypostasis. There's all the language. In a way, what that is this massive doctrinal leap forward. We have to say these things logically, but we still have to kind of work out the inner complexities of what that means. We have to get and uncover that. And that's why theology can be what it is even today. We can continue to talk about this and expand on it and learn, because we know based on our understanding of salvation and what the gospel is, Jesus has to be these things.
Are there aspects with that kind of theological development?
Yes.
That also tie to shifts in where the audience of that current theology is. That, like, I think of the whole.
Great question.
For a long time now, if you're trying to argue that Jesus is fully God and fully man, the part you have to argue for is that he's God.
Right. Yeah.
But in the first centuries, you had to argue that he was. Everyone was like, "Well, he's clearly God."
Absolutely.
But could he actually just be man too? Like, could he also be human?
This is exactly right. We have to pay. This is again the work of theology. It's another reason why I am adamant to talk about Scripture as living and active, because this is where fundamentalism runs astray, is that it ossifies and makes the text, it concretizes it in a sense and goes like, well, it clearly says right here, and just points to it. And what you're doing is evading the work of the Holy Spirit and actually the work of interpretation, because that text needs to be brought to the new culture. And it's still saying the same thing. That's not relativism. It's saying exactly your point. The early church had a different question than we do, right? That's the Gnostic tendencies and the Gnostic ideas that were around, this idea of a secret knowledge. Well, in Gnosticism, they had this, there's a number of things that Gnosticism is a bit of an amorphous term, but the idea that like creation is bad and the spiritual realm is good. So the idea of docetism, the idea that like, well, he can't really be man. He can't actually be a guy dying on the cross. Because that's dirty and you can't be God. Because that's dirty and you can't be God in that. That's their big problem. Yeah. For us, I think, are more so now inclined to, like you said, identify very much with the humanity. And we go, but how can you be isn't God omniscient and omnipresent, but Jesus is a local? So exactly, the question shifts and it moves.
Like your average person who believes in Jesus but has bad theology today would say, oh, he was a guy, and he was a good teacher, and he was maybe the most wonderful man who ever lived, but he wasn't God.
And AJ, I think from an apologetics...
Rewind 2,000 years ago, and they were going, I mean, he was clearly God, but I don't know if he was a guy.
I don't know if he was a man.
I don't think he was like a flesh and blood human.
Funny they had an easier time with that. Yeah, and I think this is where...
Why do you think that was? Do you think it was more immediacy to the miraculous?
I think that could be definitely a part of it. Again, like the idea of what's in the water at the time, what's in the ancient Near Eastern understanding, and if this is your savior, if he did rise from the dead, then surely he can't be mere mortal.
That's what I'm thinking. If you see someone rise from the dead, it's really easy to believe they're God.
Yeah,
it's harder to believe they're like, sure, God can rise from the dead, but can a man rise from the dead?
It does show you. Actually, it is another point that I think is of importance, is that when people try and say, like, is the gospel, oh, well, these are stories made up, this is mythology. And it's like, that is not how mythology, like, name any other story. Obviously, you can't do this. And, where mythological attestations get attached at that level, that quickly. To the point, one of the coolest archaeological finds I ever saw that Craig Evans, I think, had written an article on, was these pagan magical incantation bowls, and they cite the name of Jesus on the bowl. So even pagans who are doing sorcery and trying to do like spells,
it's like the whole Simony thing, right?
Yeah,
like,
in the first century or second century,
exactly.
There's power. They were like, well, that guy was doing miraculous deeds. We might as well use his name, and it just shows you they're like
Jesus in there.
Add him to the list.
People are still doing that. I mean, that's...
What I wanted to say, though, is that from an apologetic standpoint, even mentioning that stuff of like, look how the question shifted, look how it's different, can be very helpful. It's a good strategy in a way. So even in the same way that today, one of our big questions, largely because we've been saturated with Christianity for 2,000 years in the West, is the problem of violence and evil. Isn't the God of the Old Testament an angry God, and the God of the New Testament is? And you go back in the early church, okay, the first Christians, the question was the opposite. The question was like, why is he so merciful?
Yeah.
Right.
Why is he being so nice?
They were in such a violent
Exactly.
society.
Go read Jonah. The book of Jonah is exactly that point. And Jonah, we read that today and we're like, Jonah, you're so stubborn. And it's like, no, he's making the valid claim. He's like, you're going to do nothing to the Ninevites?
Kill them now.
Kill them now. Where's that happening? And
What
God's
kind
like,
of God doesn't smite? That's like your whole
I
thing.
thought you were smiting.
Smite.
Smite. They need to be smitten. It was a smite.
It was not a smite.
It was not a smite. Great. Seinfeld, Jonah.
So
That was perfect.
so problem of evil and suffering. Like, let me like encapsulate a whole line. I want to just do some kind of like rapid fire.
Oh, sure.
You know, we live in like a Dunning-Kruger world.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Where it's like
people know that term. Yep.
Yeah, I think so. Or at least I can, the idea that
Less
you
experience,
know
more
enough to be
confidence.
dangerous,
Yeah.
but you don't know enough to know you don't know enough. And people have, strongly held beliefs that are
I did watch 2 TikToks about this.
Right.
So
people have very strong held beliefs that are weakly formed.
Yes.
And a lot, like the stuff we've been talking about the last 20 minutes or so, are actually past a lot of the hang-ups that people like get hung up on with in terms of faith, in terms of Christianity, that are actually like quite, there's good answers to their questions. Like,
Yeah.
when it comes to problem of suffering, validity of scripture, or even stuff like I've encountered this recently. I posted something. I forget what the thing was I posted on social media, but I had a guy like DM me and just say, that's why I'm not religious.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you sound
Okay.
pretty religious.
Yeah.
So like, I guess I want to just kind of rapid fire maybe some of the, we have dozens of listeners out there.
Dozens.
That, would, most of them are Christians. Maybe some of them are not. They're skeptics. And a lot of the hangups I, encounter are like, oh, wow, if you would just like have a 5-minute conversation, we could knock that one out real quick. you
Yeah,
know?
sure.
So such as, okay, let's start with, I'm not religious. You
Right.
you want to tell your friend about Jesus, and your friend says, well, I'm not religious.
Yeah.
What's a good apologetic to start there?
So I would also want to be clear. For me, I don't like having a script to go to because I do think personal encounter
Sure.
in terms of. But if I'm going to give a answer from the stage, so to speak, somebody in the audience asking,
Just give some handles
Yeah.
on that line of reasoning.
I would say, for one, it's a misunderstanding of what religion means, right? Religio, to be bound together, is not a thing that you get to participate in and
not an elective
exclude.
thing.
Yeah, it is not, and that's never been how it's understood. It's always been something that it's like, to what degree do you have of this thing or something, right? In the same way that we might say like spiritual formation isn't an option. You're spiritually formed. The question is how.
Yes.
Right?
What's
and so
formed?
like your religious understanding, if what you think is I don't participate in sacrament smells and bells, right? Then I'm not religious. And it's like that doesn't quite comport with the notion of, right? And you can move this more toward what's your highest aim? What's your understanding of why do you do anything? Why do you get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah.
You have some kind of purpose you're giving yourself, right?
Yeah.
You have a God, right? To quote the great theologian Bob Dylan, you have to serve somebody, right? You've got to serve somebody. And so this idea that I'm not religious and nothing fills that void.
And that may be you, right?
Yeah.
Like serve
Exactly.
somebody. Like,
Well, and it likely is
Likely is you.
And I don't know how it could not be if it's not centered on some like the person of Jesus Christ.
That's
I
your,
don't
that's
think
your default setting,
Yeah, it's the default setting,
which you
right?
could argue is a decent explanation of the sin nature,
Yes, absolutely.
right? You're
You
born
could,
with the
completely.
default setting
I think you understand
towards your own seeing
Yeah,
yourself as God.
I think that's the whole Genesis story in the sense is, you're coming into it's self-awareness and self-consciousness that leads us astray. It brings us back to like, well, what do I think about this as opposed to like what God said. But yeah, in that sense, I would go, There's no such thing as, and now here's the problem is like, I understand maybe it's a risk in saying something like that. I don't want to come across as condescending to somebody and tell them like, you're not religious in the way that you understand the term.
Right.
But let's maybe massage this a little bit to understand where we're both coming from.
Yeah.
Because I think you probably are a person, I would say to this person, right? You're probably a person who has some kind of meaning that you give to your life, right?
You believe something.
You believe something. You have a highest aim. You have a purpose. You have, right? And unless you want to fight and say I'm a nihilist, in which case I almost applaud you for having the courtesy
courage,
of your convictions, right?
Yeah.
But if you are, why are we having this conversation?
Why are we having this segment? You clearly aren't. You're not doing a very good job of it. And that's exactly right. That's often been my apologetic when I talk to any atheist of any kind, is that when they say they're an atheist, sometimes the route in there is to say, okay, well, just be a better atheist.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you be a better atheist? Because you're not doing a very good job of it right now. And they go, what do you mean? And then you start talking to them about that, the whole, like, that's the whole idea of the sunshine atheist, right? Like, like if you want to be an atheist, be Nietzsche. Nietzsche believed that God was dead, and that meant the death of meaning as well. Yes. And I think he was right. He's kind of the poster boy for understanding atheism.
I don't know how taking like atheistic reasoning seriously doesn't lead more people to nihilism.
For sure.
I think it only works in a culture that is still so drenched in Christian concepts.
Right.
Yes, and
it's like,
exactly
I want to
right.
live in the house without acknowledging the architect.
Yes.
That is exactly
like the
right.
roof is just there. No, the roof isn't just there. Yeah, it is. Well, no, it is because the architect put it there.
Yeah.
It's something apologetics has to really take into consideration and understand that apologetics today is done from a post-Christian standpoint. Now, you could argue that term in terms of what we mean, but the idea that, like, you're 2,000 years deep into Christianity.
There's
embedded
a cultural
in the West.
Saturation. Tom Holland that you mentioned earlier is brilliant at talking about, like,
bang on.
Even a lot of the hot-button issues that the church faces today oppositionally arise from things that wouldn't like.
And so that changes our posture, right? That changes our whole disposition, I think, is helping people understand. And I mean, that's where I like leading people through to Nietzsche in that way, to be like, understand, because he's your guy, right? He's this atheist. He understood atheism can only be Christian atheism. You have to work yourself through the Christian text in order to get to it. So anyway,
Holland would talk about how, like, for example, when people point out, and rightfully so, some of the flaws of the way the church has abused power.
Yeah.
The notion that power can be abused.
Yes.
Is a Christian notion.
Oh, that's a good one.
Like pre-Christian, if you have power, you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So the idea that the strong should not abuse the weak is a Christian notion. And so even if you turn it back, like even you say, so the church has been strong and abused the weak, you're going, so we were bad at the thing we believe. Yeah.
So that's a good launching point to the second question. So let's say, okay, got me. I am religious, but I'm agnostic. And then it's like the next, logical question or hang up would be, well, I can't believe, I look around this world and I can't believe that there's a all-powerful, good, all-knowing God, and reconcile this world with that. So where do you go with the?
I think the classic apologistic answer to that is to, again, turn it back and to say, well, if something's wrong, what makes it wrong? Why are you looking at, say, like, I can't believe in a God when there's all this evil? Well, what do you mean there's evil?
Who says it's evil?
Why? This is the C.S. Lewis thing, right? Like, how can you even know what a straight line is? Like or how does he say that? I'm going to butcher that line on the fly here, but you know what I mean? Wes Huff would get it right away.
Someone had to have a ruler.
But yeah, exactly. Like, how do you know the line's crooked if you haven't seen it straight? I think is the whole point, right? Is you are talking about things ought to be another way.
Yes.
Well, how do you get an ought in a mindless universe where there is no actual direction or teleology? There is no endpoint, right? And so even the fact that we can agree, man, I agree there's evil in this world and I hate it and I want it snuffed out. What gives me hope in that, right? There's a logic behind this, right?
Yeah, that seems to be the go-to, like the very fact that you're questioning right and wrong is itself evidence.
And I think it's a good one. I mean, I have to admit, you kind of have these even quick fire answers, right? You start from these points, and then you see where the individual wants to take it, because they might, I don't know how they want to combat that. Maybe they want to come at it a different way. And this is where Christians, I think, need to be also very clear about their theology and their understanding of God, which is revealed to us in Jesus Christ, who canonically emptied himself, taking the form of a slave. And this whole idea that when you go, well, isn't God omnipowerful? Isn't he able? Why is there evil in this world? And it's like, before you can get even into the depths of how difficult that conversation is, at least I can point to a God who suffered with me in it. And the reality that his power is only demonstrated in that weakness, and only demonstrated in the way that he gave himself for us. So we're getting people to kind of move into paradox, and to kind of flip their understanding. It's like, you're coming at this from a more, well, I would think, you just naturally would think, right, that if he's all powerful, he can put a stop to this kind of stuff. And it's like, that's not quite how a free world works, right? That's not quite how creation is intended to be. We have to go to the revelation of Jesus to start to unpack that. So anyway.
I think it's helpful with that particular question when it comes up to, for people to realize that sometimes that is not an abstract thing for people.
Yeah.
Like sometimes there's something specific that happened to them.
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
And if you come at that just with cold rationalism, like, you're never going to win. For starters, you're never going to win the debate or the discussion or whatever, because their primary objection is not rational. Exactly. They're coming from a place of their own hurt. And also, you just need to be sensitive to that.
And I think that's where sometimes, either it doesn't start there, but it can, in the sense that, well, if you can bring up a sort of, here's the impasse. The impasse is, you're bringing up evil, but how can there be evil with that, right? It at least might trigger the turn to like,
I'm not saying they don't.
Oh yeah,
hold
no,
the
I get
thing.
you.
I'm just saying, like, if it's because their dad died when they were 5,
yeah, definitely.
like, you're also gonna. There's also, you need to be aware of that, and be literally sensitive to it. I mean, like, on a friend, pastor, emotional level.
Yes.
That this is not purely a thing that they were sitting around one day and thought of.
Yes.
When I have observed out there evil. But they're going, like, there's real personal hurt involved in that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think sometimes a part of, not that you don't ignore the actual conversation, but sometimes a good apologetic for that is to do what Jesus did and sit with them in that suffering.
Yeah.
As opposed to just going, like, I'm going to argue, like, I cannot. It drives me up the wall when you're at a funeral and someone's like, well, God gave us free will. Like, not the time, bro.
Right, so
not the time.
So
100% true. Not the time.
That'd be a great book idea. Just things I heard at a funeral that shouldn't have been said. Exactly. Even like just bad theology.
Oh, dude.
Well, it shows the sensitivity to
God
things.
needed another angel.
Yeah.
I used to bring up this example of it was how the theologian Origen understood interpreting Scripture as being akin to playing an instrument and mastering an instrument. And I like that analogy because it's this idea that it's like, if all Scripture is God-breathed, that's great. You can play every note on a piano and it might sound good, but like, you can play things out of harmony. You can definitely hit a bum note. Yeah. And you got to be playing the right, an actual skilled interpreter of Scripture knows how to address somebody at the funeral without going into the free will defense.
You don't go playing ragtime.
Exactly. At the funeral. He's got one of those little
hello, my good time guy.
Smashing a plate.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that comes back to, I think it's so important that Christians realize, like, our first apologetic, to circle back on what we're talking about, it is like just living an embodied faith.
Yes.
Like Jesus came in body. He didn't, the Logos came as a person. And our great high priest is sympathetic. Like, he endured, he went through all, like, the human experience. So I think that's like the primary thing as Christians we've got to hold on to. However, I think it's really important, especially in times when people are asking questions, that we do have, like, at least some basic answers in place. Like Paul also talks about, we talked a few episodes back about friendship evangelism. Yeah. It's like, yes and no. It's not enough. Yep. Like, you actually have to have, just being a presence with somebody, but never telling them, here's why I'm like this.
That whole, I think, misattributed quote, I think they usually attribute it to Aquinas, the whole like preach the gospel at all times, and
Sometimes
if necessary, use words.
It's pretty necessary.
Yeah, no, it's like, that's
You're gonna want to use some
that's
words.
the whole point of Revelation.
It's maybe those
is that it requires words.
Maybe it's two legs, right? Like that. It's just like that. It's the lifestyle and it's the word. It's the language.
If you are a hypocrite, like if your life doesn't match up to the things you're explaining, then that ruins the credibility of what you're explaining.
You can see where at a time, that saying did have some resonance. You know what I mean? There's a point to that, right? Yeah. And this is the wisdom of being able to interpret a right, is that you go, what he's saying there isn't, don't ever talk and just, exactly. It's like
even when you're not talking,
balanced about
be preaching.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can buy that.
It's holistic.
But,
so we didn't do overrated, overhated, or keep pursuit about it. What is the most overrated objection to Christianity?
Oh, the most overrated?
Yeah.
Like the one that seems to carry the most weight
like,
culturally, that has got the biggest hole in it.
That's like mic drop.
I've definitely heard some really bad one, but I'm going to try and I'm thinking of the one that's most prevalent. That's tough. I'm the first one that comes to my mind is like the Ricky Gervais, like, well, I'm just an atheist and one less God than you. Right. Which completely misunderstands the notion of God in the way that Christians should understand it. And I think one of the reasons why I don't like that one is because it shocks me that Christians, many almost think that that's a good argument. Ricky Gervais said that on Stephen Colbert, and he was like, that's good. Or sorry, no, I might have that wrong. I might be misattributing that. He might have said something else. Anyway, but the point is Gervais is the one who popularized this thing of like, oh, I'm just an atheist and one less God than you, right? Yeah. I don't believe in Thor either, and I don't believe in whatever. Yeah. And it's like, again, to not understand kind of the essential differences.
That'd be like me saying to my single buddy, I'm only one less person married than you.
Sure.
Yeah. But dude, that's all it takes.
The reason why I say that is I think it troubles me that sometimes Christians fall into the trap of thinking that God actually does operate and act sort of like Thor does, just he's just more loving. And it's like it's categorically a different thing that we're talking about. God is not a God in that sense. Yeah.
Right? Monotheism and polytheism are not one step off from each other.
It's right. And I think
they're radically different concepts.
Sometimes if you don't clarify that, then apologists can get into conversations where they're trying to prove the existence of God, and really what they're proving the existence of is a demiurge. They're proving the existence of sort of like an old bloke in the sky who, dictates certain things. And I think that's our issue for a lot of us here in the West culturally, in modernity, that we've actually thought of God too much like that sometimes. And so that when atheists use that as a mic drop moment, it's like, oh, the layers of misunderstanding. Totally. It's like you're so far behind you think you're in first place.
You kind of spoke to this on one of the earlier questions too, but this speaks to it again, the idea of like the importance of defining terms.
Yes.
Like what do you mean by that, right? Or what like not just take the surface level of what someone said, but okay, what's the thought behind that?
Push on some things. I was thinking,
what do you mean by
when you quoted Gervais? Like I've been thinking about this a lot lately, not just for atheists, but even within the church. Just because something sounds pithy, or like it rhymes, doesn't mean it's exactly good or authoritative.
And just because someone
do that.
Just because someone uses a word that you use doesn't mean they mean the same thing by that word that you mean.
Yes.
Like the religion thing is the classic like. Okay, what do we mean when we say religion? Right. What do we mean when we say God? What do we mean?
That would be my encouragement to most Christians and atheists. It's just like, push on the thing that you're standing on, right? Like that. Yeah. Like just see if it can hold your weight. Yeah.
That whole conversation about just language and definitions, I think, is maybe at the forefront to me of, and it certainly, however I will address apologetics, it'll be through that sort of lens, is going like, and this, by the way, derives itself from there's a whole philosophical tradition here. It comes out of people like Ludwig Wittgenstein, the idea of language.
I love Wittgenstein.
Oh. Don't we? He's the bomb. No, he's great. But
Stein like a Wittgenstein.
Top five favorite Steins of all time.
Ben Stein, Einstein,
Liechtenstein, an amazing country.
And Wittgenstein, close fifth. But he basically had the notion of words don't just mean what they mean according to the dictionary. They mean how they function within the community.
Totally, yes.
And this is where, again, I think Christians probably run into a little bit of trouble when they start trying to just jump into logical arguments with somebody who's completely foreign to the world in which when you use this language, you're talking what they call Christianese, right?
Yes,
you're just using a language that we have no operating system for. And that's really important. I mean, and it's important that Christians know that they're also not just using a word for when you say I believe in the Trinity, I actually better see the fruit of that, because otherwise that's just a term.
Yeah. Words are just noises that we've agreed mean something.
Yes.
But we haven't actually all agreed on what they mean, right? Like they've got this big broad spread that anyone who's using a word in good faith is using it in a way that someone else would understand it the same way they would. But that doesn't mean everyone
That's
else
exactly
would, right?
right.
And so you got to go, okay, in your world, when you say, what does that mean? And I think so often that's just good. I mean, apologetics aside,
listening.
just interacting with other humans, as soon as there's a sense of disconnect, it's always smart to just, okay, what do you mean by that?
And it's why this isn't the approach I would espouse here, but it's, when somebody goes like, I'm an atheist, and I go, no, you're not. You know, it's just because our understandings of what that are,
that's right,
are different. And I know what you mean culturally, but in its full-rooted sense.
The religion thing. Like, I'm not religious. You mean you don't ascribe to one of the major world religions?
Yes.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
You don't ascribe to a belief system that would be covered in a world religions class. That is not the same thing as not actually being religious.
It's also another reason why I like to, we've been bringing it up. I say we, like Apologetics Canada. I've heard Wes say it a number of times too, and we talked about it on one of ours, where we constantly go back to this idea that in the early church, again, Christians were the first atheists.
Yes.
Atheists. Right? You were the first to come in and say, and I say the first. Jews did this already, but the Jewish people were sort of kept to themselves.
They weren't evangelists.
They weren't bothering nobody.
That was a common accusation against the early church.
Yeah, it was like, you are atheists. You don't believe in the gods of Rome. And so like that term was first applied to us.
You believe
it shows the evolution of the term, right? Yeah. It's like where the progression.
It moved from one God to no God.
Exactly.
Well, so to Gervais's point,
but it also did not move
in the first century. Only believing in one God was so different from what the polytheists believed that you were considered an atheist. Like, if you're only going to have one, so to Gervais's point, I'm actually like, your notion that theism, monotheism, is basically just a slightly diet version of polytheism is ridiculous. The truth of the matter is, again, for polytheists, only believing in one God is so not polytheism that it's atheism, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's so far away.
But then the God of Israel, Yahweh, is, because he's the one, and there is only one, he's categorically different than Jupiter and Saturn or Zeus and
being one of one is very different than being one of a dozen or 500 or whatever else.
So like, to sort of land the plane on the apologetic stuff, and then we'll do Mountainous here. But I wanted to ask, like, we talked about, what, seekers or people who are, skeptics. We talked about some of the things that we can answer them. What is one truth you wished more Christians held more firmly or grasped?
Oh, that's a good question.
I should have given you some of these questions up front.
Yeah, I know. These are.
Hey, he's an apologist. He's got to think on his feet.
What's something that you wish, like, if more Christians just like held on to that would go a long way?
Oh man, you're killing me here, because that's a really good question. Maybe where my mind wants to go. I have to think about what I want to say here. If I have to take a beat, you need to put a pause in this podcast. Almost, I have to think about this. It's one thing I wish more Christians knew.
I wish they knew about the great education they could get at Acadia Divinity College.
Oh man, no, I do. I need to think about this more, because I think it probably has something to do with. I'll put it this way. Oh no, I'm over. You've tripped me up. You've tripped me up with this question, Brett. It's a salvation-based question to me. I think it has something to do with the way in which, like, I'll just say this: the idea that God is for you. there's so many ways to talk about that, and there are rough edges to all of Christian doctrine. There is a risk that everybody takes, I think, with their theological position. The thing that I've been so disheartened by lately is the disunity within the church. The arguments that I am seeing across the aisle from Protestantism is the correct way, Catholicism is the correct way, Eastern Orthodox is the right way. Like until you have it, Wes is getting into debates on Flagrant. That happened as well. He was questioned about orthodoxy, and that became maybe the main thing that came out of it.
Yeah.
I'm very tired of this because I can't. The idea that when you finally meet Jesus, he's going to ask you what your doctrines are. And not what he clearly said was, did you feed me?
Yeah.
Did you clothe me? Did you love your neighbor? And I am disgusted in many ways with the ways in which this has just taken a hold of Christianity, and it's this argument about who is right in the right position. And you really tripped me up with the question, because I think maybe it's been something I've been thinking about. And I distilled it down to God is for you, because I think at the very basis of this, there is a question of, are we all worshiping the same God? Right? This is a question. We live in a pluralistic society. I was asked this recently. We were talking about it in a class, actually. We have a class at Acadia on pluralism or Christianity in a pluralistic society. Andy Bannister, the apologist, asked the question, like, do Christians and Muslims worship the same God? It's a big question. Allah is very different in definition. He's not Trinity, right? So you might say on the ground, well, we definitely don't worship the same God. But it's like, then how far back do you want to pull that? How far back does it go? Do I worship the same God as Catholics? Right. They have Marian dogmas. They have, what else do they believe in? They believe in transubstantiation. Doesn't that say something ontologically different about God? And I just want to say that I'm not trying to tell you that it's not important to seek out where you think the correct thing is and where you want to land. God is so much bigger than your stupid quibbles about, do I have this right? And what I'm saying is, because he is for us, I think he accepts your misunderstandings, your wrongs, and man, Christians, be more humble about it. Like, I'm just so fed up with the arguments across the table. We have it right. Until you're Orthodox, you're not in the true church. Until you're a Protestant, you're not saved. Shut up. I really, it's grinded my gears, because I just think it's like Jesus is bigger than all of that. He's overall, and the degree to which people will go to fight for my position is right, but will not love their neighbor, shocks me.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a long answer to it.
A guy was sitting there with you in that very seat, David O'Leary, a few episodes ago. He's been a Christian for maybe a decade or so, and he's like, I didn't grow up in this, and I cannot tell you what separates Christians. I don't. That makes no sense to me. Yeah. These kind of dividing lines, like, just, he said, I can't wrap my head around why we've encamped on the things that that divide us, when 99.9% of what matters we all agree on.
100%.
It's now. Are you a universalist?
When it comes to
just like,
healthcare,
I would. What would you wish more Christians held to? I'll go while you think about it.
Sure, go ahead.
Just to me, it's the. I wish more, and I'll start with myself. I wish I imagined the world in which Jesus is the center of it, like the reality of the kingdom of heaven. I wish I had more of a sense of the intersection of like heaven and earth, and like in John Eldridge's new book, he talked about how God designed us to be what the word he used, amphibians. That how the same way like a frog is built to be both underwater and on land. Yeah, we are both. We've been built to be both in the physiological and spiritual realms at the same time, be able to interact and intersect with both those things. I wish, and back to your salvation statement, I wish more Christians realize the gospel of the kingdom more than just like a soteriological gospel. Like, hey, I'm saved, I'm going to go to heaven someday. No, like,
because I'm in the right camp.
Jesus actually, has birthed new creation, torn the veil of separation between us and God, and heaven can be increasingly experienced in the here and now. So I wish we would embrace a little more mysticism, I guess.
That's that's a great one too. I think there's a sense in, like, I was thinking about that as well. One of the ones that I wanted to say is also like maybe the fact that God speaks, like he speaks, literally speaks. And I don't mean that in the sense of like bad, but I mean it in, maybe. And what some people hear audible words, but I think my point is more so like God does speak and move and is active in your life. And I will say almost exclusively that will only happen as you go through Scripture. There's something deeply related there that cannot be undone or undermined, and that's a thing. That's
yours, AJ.
I mean, what you shared, Ben, of course, is a hobby horse for me too, in terms of just greater church unity and greater humility, but in the interest of saying something different but still related, I wish more Christians would resist the sound bitification of theology.
Yes, so true.
Like the notion that a 7 or 8 word pithy phrase is going to capture everything. And I encounter this where people just don't have a capacity for nuance. In their theology. And
that's a word I get thrown around. I love it because it's so true. Everything is nuance.
Like there's a, how can, if this is this, then this, you're like, well, except for this and maybe then. But you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, which is not, it's not about being wishy-washy, but again, like if you see theology as what we know to be true about God, which is kind of my work and definition of it, it's a relational thing. And if you can boil someone down to a soundbite, that actually is evidence you don't know them well. Like we just did my dad's 80th birthday, and I could give you some pithy statements about my dad, but they wouldn't fully capture, none of them would fully capture whatever I'm trying to address in that. And so sometimes it's okay to have some like shorthand as a way into something. Like it's not that everything has to be a 4-day answer, but also, like just the odds that we'll pick on TikTok, like no TikTok video is likely to contain excellent theology.
No, it can't.
Based on its length.
Exactly.
Like there's more nuance. Like you think
more to it.
When we go in full circle back to the Gospels, these guys have to write this stuff down by hand. It's going to have to be copied by, like, you don't just throw junk in, right? You're being very efficient. And when someone said to them, so not even just who is Jesus, but like who is Jesus in terms of being the Jewish Messiah, or who is Jesus as it relates to the concept of the Logos? They're going like, all right, here's the tight answer I can give you. 20 chapters later, right? Like the notion that good theology is going to be boiled down to sound bites.
So true.
It's an easy way out that leads to a more shallow understanding, less accurate, probably, but definitely more shallow understanding of God.
So it's excellent. I think I always talk about, theologians are always talking about the question of sort of the dialectical tension, if you will, that exists between the simplicity and complexity of these things. There's a reason why the gospel is for tiny babes, right? The idea is for the children. It is for, like, anyone can understand this base, like Jesus loves you, has died for your sin. Okay. At the same time, it is as complex as the universe itself and all of its inner workings, because Christ is at the center of those things. And so there's a great quote from Andrew Myers, the theologian. He's an Australian guy. He says, "We never go deeper than our baptism." I love that because it's like, it's all there. The baptism is here. And then it's in the sense that what he's saying is we never go beyond it. It's that we only go deeper into the reality of what is said at the baptism. And so it's all as simple as that.
That's back to your Christological development thing.
Right? Like,
it's
all as simple as that.
It's not new information. It's just a clear articulation of it. But
absolutely.
Who is it that talks about, I'm trying to remember who's this, I'm going to get the quote wrong and I won't be able to attribute it, but basically, like, we are after the simplicity that's on the other side of complexity.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Like it's yes, it can be understood by children, but if you're an adult, you shouldn't be going how simple, like how limited an understanding of this can I have for the sake of simplicity, but how do I try to understand this as deeply as I can, which then leads me back to my baptism, but a richer understanding of what that is than I ever
I'm back
had
to the
before.
beginning. I feel I almost a burden to say just a little bit more on that, because this question it's deeply it's been on my mind lately, that nuance, that uncovering, that, like I said, there is a simplistic way in which you can say things that are absolutely true about the gospel. But this idea that you can't go when you take that away, the gospel is no longer living and active. And this is what I mean. So when I talk about salvation, sometimes I think people point to it like it's just a clear formula.
Yes.
And I'm going, no, that's not right. I mean, and I'm feeling a burden to even respond to, like you, I think jokingly asked, am I a universalist? But the truth is that there's so much depth and richness to the, like patristic universalism, the idea that one day God will be all in all, is actually something that most Christians don't even take into account, because they've already decided what their dogma should be.
Right.
And then it's said and done. And this is where, like, the confessions of it's like, I'm never going to doubt the Trinity, but understanding the inner workings of exactly what that means and how it plays out, we have to address that. And so when I talk about the salvation thing, it's like I wish Christians would explore more the idea that maybe the world is a hospital and this is a rescue mission more than a courtroom and you're guilty.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't mean that the courtroom analogy doesn't apply.
Yep.
And I wish people would be able to look at something like the atonement, for instance, what Christ's work does on the cross, and not narrow it down to one single theory, as though you can do that, and to say somehow the universe is contained within that moment.
You ever read King Jesus Gospel, Scott McKnight?
Oh, no, I'm aware of it,
good.
but yeah, Scott McKnight.
He basically same thing, where he's like, especially Western evangelicals have a soteriological, like, salvation
this is it.
idea of, like, it's just atonement. You were guilty, now you're not. You
penal
were going to go to hell,
substitution.
now you're not, and that's the
And I think
entirety of it.
that basic understanding is really, you will, any doctrine that you, or dogma that you kind of ascribe to, I'll be able to find scripture that can challenge it right away.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, and this doesn't mean it's wrong, but I'm just going to say, like, it means that the wisdom to go deeper into it. So when people say things
more.
like, like by faith you are saved, faith alone, sola fide, sola gratia. Okay. For sure. Ephesians 2:8-9 tells me that, right? You are saved by grace. Yeah. This is not of your own doing, so that none may boast. Then Matthew 25, Jesus starts talking about sheep and goats. Sounds pretty works-based to me. Yeah, you fed, you clothed, you did these things. You didn't, and you believed, and you're the ones who are going away. How do you reconcile, right? And I'm trying to say that's not a contradiction in the text. Yeah. That's not something that, what this requires is the wisdom to be a true disciple, an apprentice to Jesus, in the words of John Mark Comer, and it's very popular right now.
Willard.
Or Willard, you know, but the idea of being apprentice, okay?
As popularized by John Mark Comer.
As popular. Yeah, we all know Willard's the
There's
guy.
always that band.
I read that book.
There's always that band whose cover becomes like, Whitney Houston. No, Dolly Parton.
No, actually, very true. But this idea, okay, of holistically walking with and moving into that life, which makes sense of it all.
Beautiful.
It's always bigger. It's always bigger.
I think it's time for Mountainous Top 4.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think let's get it. So today on the Mountainous Top 4, we thought, we've not done this. If Canada had a Mount Rushmore, who are you putting on it?
If Canada had
Canada
I love
But
it.
it doesn't have to be prime ministers.
No, just
of
who are
of
you
Canadians.
putting on
Who
your
is
Mount
Canada
Rushmore?
produced?
Top 4 Canadians of all time.
According to you.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying.
Gosh.
Doesn't have to be politicians,
Yeah.
just anyone. So
I think it would actually be very contrary to Canadian culture to put politicians.
It would be.
yeah,
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Well,
There's
I'll get us.
it doesn't sound like us.
I'll get us started appropriately lowbrow.
Sure.
So
The Beebs. No.
no, Beeves did not.
No,
make
he's not
mine.
making
Chad
that.
Kroger.
Chad Kroger. Avril Lavigne.
All right. Number 1, Steve Nash.
Yeah. You know what? Big high five. Absolutely. What a gem.
Just made basketball a thing in Canada. So number 2, the great one, Wayne Gretzky.
Yep.
Okay.
Number 3, Red Green.
Oh, good
Steve Smith.
call. Good
Greg
call.
Green. Number 4, here's a more serious one. Sir Leonard Tilley.
Oh,
He was one of the fathers of Confederation.
Okay.
Grew up here in New Brunswick. There's a statue of him in King Square in St.
there
John.
you go. You got a historical
And the
figure in there.
reason he's on mine is he was a Christian, and he was the one that brought Psalm 72:8 into the conversation in Confederation, where
He'll have
the idea of dominion, and that God will have dominion in Canada from sea to sea.
Very good.
So I love that I take a lot of comfort and confidence knowing that that's in the ground as our nation was formed, even though we tend to veer astray. Those prayers were seated in the foundations of this nation. So we can thank Sir Leonard Tilley for that. We can thank God for Sir Leonard Tilley for that.
Sounds good.
So there's my 4.
That's a good list. You want me to go?
If you're ready, go.
Do you actually have a list already
Yeah, I
made?
do.
Oh, you have a list made. So,
But I'll let you go and then try not to pick very many that were on your list.
are you okay? Yeah, you don't. I won't close it out. Well, so you mentioned a Leonard, which makes me think I'm going to put Leonard Cohen on my list. I think Leonard Cohen,
Great songwriter.
Yeah.
I studied.
Also sang.
Also sang sometimes. I studied Leonard Cohen in my undergrad because I did an English degree, and he was in my Canadian literature course.
Did you find out
on
what the secret chord was?
That's for you to discover,
think
my
it's a
friend. I
D-sus.
can't. I think it's a D-sus. I've always been suspect of that D. Leonard Cohen is just his voice, and I mean that as a poet, not his singing voice, but as as somebody who produced Canadian literature and actually somewhat he was Jewish, but his sort of theological understanding. I just think Leonard Cohen is an incredible Canadian gem that I would put on there. I might say, if you're talking like historical figures, somebody who's made like a big impact, I might say Tommy Douglas. Tommy Douglas is the one who brought healthcare to Canada and universalized it. And part of the reason why that happened was because of his Christian convictions.
Wow.
And I'm not some expert on Tommy Douglas in the history, but his name is definitely, it comes to mind. I remember when I was young, we would drive through in London, Ontario. There's a statue of him. And a flame. It's outside of a hospital building and it burns always. It's just constantly lit. And we would always drive by it. My dad would go like, "You know who that is?" And he'd make sure you know. That's
Tommy Douglas.
That's Tommy Douglas, my boy. Yeah.
Sounds like a mobster.
And then along came Justin Trudeau to ensure we could all be constantly lit.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. You mentioned Steve Nash. I'm actually I think I would put him on there as well. Because as far as Canadian athlete, like, man, he's been my favorite for a long time. Like, yeah.
He's a basketball player, for those of you who don't know.
But like,
I knew he played
what,
basketball.
two-time
NBA,
MVP, two-time MVP, you know, which
Took
Shaq
Canada-
is pretty mad about.
Took Canada deep in the Olympics back in the early 2000s.
Yeah. And then another athlete, Ross Rebliat, you know. Remember that? No, who would be the last Canadian on that list? For me, I think it has to be Jim Carrey.
Hey.
Growing up, there was no bigger fan. Like, I am the biggest. He gave me my personality for the first 10 years of my life.
This is probably going to be on your top 4. But I saw a clip yesterday. I follow like a Norm MacDonald.
In my head, I just went, I forgot Norm. You said
it was a clip of Jim Carrey on Norm's show when he had a show, and he's like, I remember, Norm, one time you came by the set of Man on the Moon, and Norm goes,
yeah, I was in the movie.
I was in the movie.
I was in the movie.
You could call it visiting the set, but I was actually in the...
Others would call it visiting the set. Sorry, that...
Retraction. Norm
Such a retraction, actually. And I'm disappointed that you had to say it before. It just came into my brain, and I was like...
It was the hypocrisy.
It was the hypocrisy. No, Norm MacDonald truly is. He would be the number 1 on mine because... And part of that has to do not only with the fact that I love comedy, and I loved his comedy, but I believe that there was always so much more going on with Norm than people understood.
Yeah.
And well, the fact that he went out the way he did. Yep. I mean, he died of cancer and he didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And he
I didn't even know he was sick.
Yeah, that's on his tombstone.
The fact that he set up
his own joke.
Exactly.
Those
I know.
So
Incredible.
meta, man.
Incredible.
And I think he was a deeply spiritual person. And
Who's your 4, AJ? Take us home.
I mean, I tried to figure out some comedians I wanted to throw in, And man, I didn't think of Norm either, and I'm kicking myself for it. But I also had Gretzky on my list, but I won't double up on that either. So I'm gonna go Rick Mercer.
Hey,
okay.
If for nothing else other than his Talking to Americans special. Nothing defines Canadian culture more than laughing at Americans, and he kind of distilled that down. That was purest form.
That was gold. King Sven of Canada. You remember? Yeah,
the petition to stop people from jumping off Peter Mann's bridge. Congratulations, Canada, on legalizing VCRs. Like, it was so good. Then I'm going to go Mr. Dress Up.
Hey,
okay, all right.
Yeah,
I went to see Mr. Dress Up in concert when I was in grade 12.
Yep.
What's a Mr. D concert all
about? It was great. He just comes out and does his... Yeah. Well, this was after Casey and Finnegan, but he had some characters on there. Just basically,
one of his treasure chests.
What you'd expect. Tickle Trunk.
They were still in the Tickle
treasure
Trunk?
Oh, yeah. No, they... when the puppeteer who did them died, they were buried with her.
Talk about how language changes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tickle trunk, Ben.
They retired Casey and Finnegan when the original puppeteer died.
A 65-year-old man with the tickle trunk is not a safe thing.
Dressing up in costumes. Yeah, no, it was big Mr. Dress Up fan. Shaped my childhood. I'm gonna go Stan Rogers. The great folk singer.
Now that we're talking about Stompin' Tom, should have been in there somewhere.
So I considered Stompin' Tom, but
Stan
beat him out, and I was trying not to double dip in single areas. And then legitimately, I think arguably the greatest Canadian of all time in terms of capturing the spirit of what it is to be Canadian, Terry Fox.
Hey,
okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I remember doing a Canadian literature class, and our my teacher said what separates Canadian literature from American literature is that Canadians die. Like, the Americans always win at the end. They always, they harness the Wild West, and the Canadians die of exposure. That kind of thing.
Right.
And like the idea that this guy, out of love and concern for other people, with a quiet tenacity, died in the process of trying to help folks.
I love
that just feels very Canadian to me.
I like that's a good list. That deserves a horn blast. The edifiers were off. Hey, Ben, thanks, man, for being on. This was
a lot of fun.
This is a ton of fun. This is a good episode.
This was great, guys.
Come back season 2.
Absolutely.
For sure.